Welcome to episode 120 of the Grip Strip Podcast, the Hot Enough for You edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm here today with my co-host, as always, Joshua Fun. What's going on, brother?
Hey, I'm doing great, Phil. Had a great week and everything. Great Father's Day and celebration of that. Of course, we've got a lot to talk about, though. F1 Canadian Grand Prix, trucks at Knoxville. A lot of stuff that happened this week. I'm glad that we kind of delayed the recording, I guess, to catch up on all the news, of course, and everything. So, glad to be on, and of course, glad to have our friend Joe back on again with us.
And our returning guest, a regular contributor to us, a guy who now gets to say he works at a cool speedway, one of the best racetracks that exists, New Egypt Speedway, amongst his many other jobs that he does. Writer for Fansided and Beyond the Flag, Joe Passero is back. So we have two Dale Earnhardt Jr. fans on yet again, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. is back to yell, "Slide job!" or whatever. They won't do slide jobs at Nashville, but maybe they will with the Gen 6, Gen 7 car. What's going
I
on,
don't
Joe?
know. I'll tell you what, I was in preparation because I don't remember the Nashville race too well from last year. I actually watched the race last night over again. And I'll tell you, I think with this next gen car, there may be room for some slide jobs tomorrow. But it's good to be back. Thank you guys for having me on. I've got some new equipment, so hopefully everybody's hearing me okay. And yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about. A lot even just happening in the past few hours with contract extensions. A lot of news this week. And I know we'll get into that, so I'm not going to start that now. But thanks again for having me on. It's always fun coming and getting to talk with you guys about racing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a weird week in other areas of life, but in regards to what we're dealing with right now, we're just talking about we're going to stay in what makes us all happy. And I think for a lot of people that want to listen, they just want to be happy and just get away. That's what we'll do. We'll talk about racing. You may get to hear me lose my crap if the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup. It won't be. I don't think we're going to be on that long. We are liable to. We have done long episodes, the three of us together, so it's possible you could see me lose my crap if the Colorado Avalanche somehow or another pick up their first Stanley Cup in 21 years. I was a young kid. It was a lifetime ago back then when they won it the last time. So it'll be cool if that happens. We'll give you a little live updates on the truck race once I can go and change a channel here. But thanks for coming on, Joe, as always. Now you're working at New Egypt Speedway, so that's cool. So getting to see the Pouch family and some of the other great racers from the state of New Jersey going and plying their trade on dirt. It's funny that I literally work with somebody that is right basically around the corner from the old Flemington Speedway, and they still have the shed there, but it's a Lowe's, and it's sad. So it's like, it's kind of depressing what's happened to our racetracks. I mean, they took away one of the greatest drag strips ever and made it, I mean, my friend Keith loves drifting, and they're cool, but I'd rather see a car go 330 miles an hour instead of tire. And they smoke their tires too, but they go really, really fast. So I missed that. Yeah, she ain't a bad-looking woman. And her hair is the same color as a Colorado uniforms. Wow, that's something. So we'll get into Formula One, of course. Fish Lips took yet another win, but it wasn't as straightforward as it has been for him. Carlos Sainz and Sir Lewis Hamilton had a chance there late. We had some other things go on, other key news items that came out of the Canadian Grand Prix, and next week we'll get into the British Grand Prix more in detail. Todd Gilliland driving for his dad, who they spelled his name wrong on the broadcast, which is great. Amongst the many great things they did with that broadcast, since they had the bright idea of giving Jamie Little the lead announcer role. That must have really taken a lot of thought. I mean, they should have heard Chris Voda doing the ARCA race with Trado or whatever at Iowa, and they started that race like 4 hours late. And the two of them actually had a good chemistry. And then they had Dave Reef. I forget who was on pit. Oh, no, they had Mike Massaro on pit road. I'm like, holy crap. It's like backwards NBC time going on here. And it's like, wow, we have professionals doing it. It's not Jamie Little. It's not freaking, what's that idiot,
Vince
Bob
Welch.
Dillner? Oh yeah, and Vince Welsh. They're the triple threat of suck. Those three. They're just like some of these hack journos too that suck the teat of everybody in NASCAR, and we can't even call a spade when real crap is happening. But it's kind of like with there's little bull crap with like golf too. I mean, and that was a good golf tournament. The U.S. Open was great. Matt Fitzpatrick won that one. It was a little carnage golf, but it got really good at the end there on Sunday. We'll talk about the passing of Bruton Smith. Other news. Joe, of course, is connected in the NASCAR world deeply. We'll get into supercars at Darwin, SRX at Five Flags in last week, which saw Helio Castro-Neves win. And likely get a ride in Dale's 91 car for next year's Daytona 500. If Donald Hawk has anything to do with it, and a guy who also worked for Bruton Smith for many years. We'll get into MotoGP, talk about the 6 hours at the Glen, one of the biggest sports car races in the world, and hopefully I'll do my best to get there next year because there's going to be so many cool cars, including the Porsche 963. Talk about Rally Kenya, and then in the roundup, all of that, and then we'll get into the triple header at Nashville Super Speedway. NBC comes back to cover the rest of the Xfinity and Cup season. They had practice today, so they were on. You saw Dale Earnhardt Jr. posting on his Insta after going and testing Josh Berry's late model at North Wilkesboro Speedway, probably in preparation to go and drive a race later this summer. It sounds like he was hinting at it on his show, so I don't think I'm going out of saying anything out of song. And Josh will talk about sim scene. I know in Gran Turismo, based on Super GT, that Watkins Glen's on the game. So that's pretty cool. And then there's a couple other things with Formula 1 2022 and certain other things on iRacing. And we'll close this deal out. So start with Formula 1, though. Max Verstappen gets yet another win. It wasn't as straightforward as it... wow, Bubba actually led practice? Christ. Okay. They were he had to work for it there at the end. Saw Carlos Sainz trying to pass him, but he really had nothing there. The DRS, even with the power of the DRS, the Red Bull's ability, Josh, to get off the corners was too powerful. Their engine, I think, may have a little bit more power. You can make the notion that after the Ferrari issues that we've seen, maybe they have to turn them down a notch. Of course, trying to save your components. That played a role in Charles Leclerc's race because he had to start tailback because of having to take a bunch of power unit components, and came all the way back, finished in the top 5, which was a solid run for him. Verstappen, it's his 5th win in 6 races, and it's his 6th win of the year out of 9 races. So he's trying to do like the what do you call Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton win like 12, 13 races kind of deal this year and win this world championship to put it to rest that he actually is a legitimate champion, which whatever. He can do whatever he wants. He's still a ball licker. But he won by less than a second over Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz made a mistake trying to go into the hairpin there on the last lap, I think, or the next last lap, lost DRS, and it kind of basically sealed it. Sir Lewis Hamilton, finished 7 seconds behind, gets his first podium since Bahrain. was the happiest he's been all year. For the first time all year, the Mercedes didn't look like a piece of trash. George Russell gets yet another top 5 finish. Charles Leclerc, as I mentioned, finished top 5 after starting 19th. Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Fernando Alonso, and Lance Stroll round out the points finishers. Stroll from 17th to 10th. So yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. I mean, Josh, Joe, if you have anything to add, of course, let me know. But Josh, I think it was a pretty solid race. I actually didn't mind it because they were actually showing some of the battles that were going on behind Verstappen. The tire strategy also played a key, which also played a role for Lewis, I think, in what ended up happening as giving him a podium finish there as well, with him and Verstappen pitting early relative to some of the other teams.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting race, of course, with Verstappen having to really defend the lead towards the end. I mean, I think for me, I thought that Carlos Sainz might have an advantage, especially with having fresher tires at the end after taking advantage of the virtual safety car to go and pick up tires on the fresh hard tires over Verstappen. And I thought maybe that Verstappen, would take a couple laps and it would overtake Verstappen and take the win, but it never really worked out like that. It could only get within less than half a second, just under less than half a second, up to Verstappen, and I think it was basically just a matter of being able to get off the corners as well as the Red Bull. And that seems to be the advantage, especially with power, and I think even with their chassis and suspension, seems like they have an advantage there. Seemed like for Carlos Sainz, he'd have to be able to get off of turn 10 really well, and then get the DRS down the straight going into turn 11 and 12 and 13, and being able to go through circuit all the way down to turn 1. And it seemed like once you got through those set of turns and you have the S's through 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8 and 9, it seemed like Carlos Sainz maybe was trying a little bit too hard through those corners, and that seemed like where he was losing a lot of kind of his momentum that he'd have to make it back up in the hairpin in turn 10. And then get down there and get the DRS, and that's kind of what he was fighting with in that last 16 laps or so of that race after the virtual safety car. So if he had been able to get through those corners well, I think maybe we could have seen a pass through the lead within that last green flag stint to end the Formula One Grand Prix of Canada. So would have been interesting, but nonetheless, it does show the power advantage and maybe the chassis advantage that Red Bull has currently over Ferrari, and certainly what Max Verstappen's driving talent, being able to drive defensively when needed, at the end. So, but that definitely a challenging race for him, because he led the first 8 laps for Verstappen, and then they went and took their first pit stop, and that allowed Carlos Sainz to go and take the lead, and then he held the lead for 17 laps, and then eventually after pit stops and everything, we saw Verstappen take the lead back and basically hold on to the lead for the rest of the race. So it was basically a fight, but he did have to earn it, so it wasn't like he totally ran away with it for Verstappen there. I think for me, maybe the surprise of the race was Fernando Alonso, having a good weekend, qualifying second. He was one of the fastest cars in P3 practice, third practice session of the weekend. So I think that was definitely shocking to see. And then he was up front for the first quarter of the race, and then I think they kind of went different on their strategy compared to the rest of the field, and I think they probably delayed their pit stop a little too soon compared to Verstappen and Sainz, and that led to their kind of dropping in position throughout the rest of the field. And then towards the end, Alonso had those engine issues with his car, so didn't really get the finish that maybe he was looking for, but still ended up remaining in the points to end the weekend. So not a bad weekend for Alonso, although it does show maybe the improvements that Alpine has been making throughout the season. So we could see potential potential more finishes like that, races, weekends like that for Alonso and the Alpine team. So, yeah, definitely a fairly entertaining Grand Prix for sure, especially at this track, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve.
Yeah, to have the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve back um, on the calendar for the first time in 3 years because of the pandemic. The fans showed up in droves. They sat there and wet. They sat there and dry. Like, it was just a great weekend. It's a track that should be holding more than one race a year, honestly. I'm talking to you, NASCAR. I'm talking to you, IndyCar. Um, it's a great place. I mean, hell, if IMSA had, or like the World Endurance Championship, I would sign to watch like a 8 hour or 6 hour enduro there because it's hard braking. You have lots of generation. It's tight. You have to work hard there. Traffic would be interesting as well at that track. But yeah, Alonso did qualify well, but in the end, their strategy wasn't exactly the best. Didn't work out too well for them. And then he ended up finishing behind his own teammate, which is crazy to think. Ocon started seventh, but Ocon had a strong enough weekend. They're Alpine is a team that's kind of had their moments, have underperformed in certain ways, but in other ways, I think they're doing okay. So it's like, it's weird because they're in the same boat as McLaren right now. The top two teams are pretty set in stone with Red Bull and Ferrari. Sergio Perez, of course, falls out of the race very early, conveniently, just as he gets close to Max Verstappen. Last two races, all of a sudden he was right there points wise, and then tell him to pull over, and then they go and tell him to, and then they go and give him a bogey engine. They're doing him like Mark Webber, conveniently here, to protect Max Verstappen, of course, and his fragile ego. But people who want to talk about fragile egos, well, Sir Lewis Hamilton was not happy during practice on Friday. They didn't have the fastest car by any means, but the rain presented an opportunity for the guy who has won at Montreal 7 times, tying him with Michael Schumacher. Won his first career race there. One of his best racetracks, qualifies 4th in the rain, and then solid start, holds his position, takes a similar strategy to Max Verstappen, and with that restart, the safety car restart, after Yuki Tsunoda crashed coming out of the pits, he was staying with those top two guys. It initially, for about 4 laps, 5 laps, he was there. And then slowly but surely, he lost time, but he was in his own world. But he finally was up there. And you could tell the joy he had and the happiness he had because he actually had a car for the first time this year to compete with. And George Russell did George Russell things. Struggled in qualifying, but made up for it in a race. So honestly, I think we'll get more into it for the British Grand Prix preview next episode 121, and we'll get into Mercedes more. And Alfa Romeo getting a double points finish, big deal for them, considering where they were the last couple of years. This combination of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu seems to be very solid. Valtteri Bottas seems rejuvenated. He seems like a whole different guy. And then Zhou Guanyu has been very, very solid. And he's just doing what he has to do. And that's a team that some of these cost cuts and things are going to help. On the flip side of that, you have the Haas team, who Kevin Magnussen qualified 5th, best qualifying run ever by the Haas F1 team. He had a broken wing, I think, on the start. He got into somebody, and then they gave him a penalty flag or whatever to where he had to go and pit the car, and that ruined his race. And then at the same time, Mick Schumacher, who was running up front or relatively up front, had a chance, probably would have had a chance for points. His engine quits because it's Mick Schumacher. Bad things happen to him. Like, he has a cartoon anvil over his head. So it was a nightmare scenario for Haas F1 at Montreal, looking for recovery this next race. The the McLarens had a nightmare weekend. Neither scored points. You look at Vettel had a brutal weekend. Albon couldn't advance because his car's a piece of trash. So, I mean, we'll get more into it next episode for sure in regards to Formula One and what we should expect going into the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. There's also the news of, before we move on, I know that Pierre Gasly signed an extension to stay for another year at AlphaTauri. Which I mean is not surprising because there isn't a seat at Alpine, which leads into the Oscar Piastri thing, Josh, where we still don't know who's going to be driving the second Williams at Silverstone. All signs are, I would think, going towards, if not there at France, Oscar Piastri getting into Formula One for the rest of this season at least. It may not be for 2023 because, of course, Williams has plenty of development drivers of their own, like Logan Sargent. So we'll see about what happens with that. But yeah, I mean, those two news stories are not really shocking relative to what the grid is looking like at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really shocking. I think Gasly's probably going to end up being, I guess, I don't want to say stuck. That's maybe not the right word to use, but certainly it looks like he's going to be staying there for a longer time. And people talk about, where is he going to end up beyond AlphaTauri? Because I think, and a lot of people still think AlphaTauri is kind of like the little brother to Red Bull, even though they are an independent team. It's kind of meant to be a developmental team. So there's a lot of different things that could happen, and you have to look to 2024 to see what happens there. Does a seat open up at Alpine? Does Fernando Alonso stay there another year, or does he end up leaving that team at the end of this year? He's only on a two-year deal, and whoever replaces him, like you said, with Piastri possibly replacing Fernando Alonso, or in 2024, for example, with Red Bull, potentially a seat open up there. Sergio Perez, a seat possibly if he isn't retained beyond 2023, but certainly could impact the rest of the field. And I think for Pierre Gasly, I think he's going to have to just continue to bring on solid finishes and just show he can be a solid asset to any team. And in the meantime, continue to be the best driver out of the AlphaTauri stable. So we'll see what happens. But I think looking like for now, at least that team seems to be kind of staying the same, at least for the next year.
I mean, I think the second AlphaTauri seat might be in question, depending on what happens in Formula 2. If a Red Bull guy can somehow or another come back around and pass Felipe Drogovic. But likely scenario is Yuki gets another year. Right now, the grid is pretty much set up, it looks like, for next year. There are no, other than the McLaren seat for Daniel Ricciardo, and maybe Fernando Alonso, but I don't think so. And then Williams and Aston Martin if Sebastian Vettel decides to quit. Some of the lower teams probably have a seat that might be open. Oh, that's a penalty. They didn't call it though. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I mean, we're getting close to that summer break. We're about a month or so away from that. So some of that news will be coming out fast and furious for sure. Let's switch gears, get Joe in. He's waited patiently, so thank you for that. Been watching the truck race and give us an update. I'll throw to you first. It is live. We're doing the show during the truck race at Nashville. Jack Wood already wrecked himself, so congrats to him for participating. He's doing what he usually does, which is wreck and be useless. In regards to last weekend's race, which was also pretty useless, the race at Knoxville Raceway, where the Knoxville Nationals, of course, takes place, saw Todd Gilliland winning his dad's truck officially, even though I contend that the Front Row Motorsports truck is essentially a David Gilliland racing truck too, but whatever. I don't know. I don't have the time to go and look at the logistics of where the truck is located, who's working on it, what shop it's in. It's entirely possible Bob Jenkins has enough room to have a truck team there, and they farm out certain stuff to DGR and they get the rest of it in. I don't know. The connection between David Gilliland and Bob Jenkins has gone on for many, many years. But Todd Gilliland, I would say, of course, now he's a rookie in the Cup Series, has had a rough beginning, of course. I think it's a bad case, having to jump into a brand new formula team, trying to go, and they've been switching all kinds of stuff year after year with drivers and crew chiefs and whatever. I think there's going to be a fight there. Got a broken stick. Yeah, that's a delayed penalty on Tampa. Yeah, there definitely was something going on there. Now they're throwing another stick. Yeah, there you go. So that should be another penalty. Okay. But Todd Gilliland goes and wins over John Hunter Nemechek. They were the two of the three dominant vehicles. Carson Hocevar, of course, runs up front and has a chance, but then ends up blowing an engine, driving around with a broken leg and all that stuff. Proven once again how he's that next big thing. I think one of the next big guys that's going to go and win a race, but maybe it'll be tonight. But I'll throw to you, Joe. I know you were busy doing other things, but since you're our NASCAR expert, our hired hand, even though Josh, of course, still is more into it, and I still have my, of course, Chase Briscoe and Josh Berry fandom. Gilliland gets a win for DGR, proving it isn't the vehicles that are the issue for Hailie Deegan. It's Hailie Deegan. But the people that are up front, John Hunter, Zane Smith, those are two of the championship guys right now in the point standings. It's a consolidation race. When you're talking about dirt, guys like that they're not theoretically dirt racers. Ben Rhodes had a rough night. Chandler Smith. There, you got four guys within 14 points. It's a very intriguing points battle. It might be the most intriguing points battle, honestly, amongst the series right now. And their playoffs aren't far away.
Yeah, they've only got 6 races, right? Cup's got 10. I believe Xfinity might have 8 or 9. So, for the trucks, they don't have a lot of opportunities. If you're outside of the top 10, you better try and find your way into victory lane and try to secure a place in that 10-car playoffs, right? In the trucks, it's only 10 trucks that make it. It's not like Cup where you have 16 out of the 36 regular charter teams that show up on a week-to-week make the playoffs. This is a much smaller field. In regards to last week's race, I always say, I usually keep an open mind when the trucks or Xfinity or Cup goes to a brand new racetrack. They did that last year by going to Knoxville. And, last year's Knoxville race, I think there were some strong reactions to. A lot of people didn't seem to particularly enjoy it. I think, though, that the race itself was just... it was because there were so many cautions, and right when you constantly have to throw that yellow flag, and that's not NASCAR's fault. I want to make that clear. That is not NASCAR's fault. You got to throw the yellow flag if there's a wreck, right? I mean, common sense. But I think the quality of the race itself hurt because there were so many cautions. And coming back this year, I didn't get to tune into the full race. I came home from working at New Egypt Speedway, and I only caught last 40 laps maybe. And so I don't know in particular if it was any better. I do know Jessica Friesen flipped. That was all over Twitter. But in regards to the racing itself, and I'll even dig a little deeper into just the dirt aspect of NASCAR and dirt. It seemed like it was better quality than last year, the racing itself. However, it seemed like it was really hard to pass. It seemed like, you kind of had to run within about, a lane and a half of the outside. And if you weren't running that lane, you were not really making any progress. I think John Hunter in the 40 laps that I watched was really the only truck that could hold the bottom and hold it relatively well. And even he was not going forward after Todd Gilliland had taken the lead. So, it seems like a single groove racetrack. I can appreciate that NASCAR went to a dirt track that wasn't Bristol. I was pretty vocal after last year's Bristol race that I felt like if NASCAR was going to go to a dirt track, it should be a track that was an actual dirt track. No, nothing against the people who put in the work at Bristol. While I appreciate that work,
Eldora.
It didn't seem to work out. The Eldora racing to me was always very exciting. Bristol and Eldora, of course, two very different racetracks. Dirt, asphalt, whatever you want to compare. Bristol and whatever Bristol formed to Eldora, very different tracks. So I appreciated last year when they went to Knoxville, just because they went to a track that was known, first of all, very well known within the sprint car community and the dirt racing community in general. But a track that, the management understands the dirt and the clay and all the components of wetting down the track and such, and they're more used to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, the track itself, it didn't seem like there was a lot of kick up of the dust. That's one thing I can't stand, because then it makes it impossible to view what's actually happening. So I can appreciate that, at least. It seems like the management of the track, from the track perspective, much better. But I really don't know. It seems like we've had two races at Knoxville in 2 years. And I always say give a track a second chance. I'd rather them go to a different dirt track, maybe one that's got a little more banking. Hopefully that provides a little bit different passing opportunities. But it just seems like Knoxville, this year was hindered by, I think, the passing problem. And I don't know what happened to Ben Rhodes. I saw the picture on social media. He was holding this giant chunk of mud. That was a little strange to me. I feel like something like that probably should have been addressed prior to the race. I don't know if it was just missed or what, but it was a race. They happen, and it makes you really appreciate the better races that you have on the schedule, and that you hope that some of those races, even if they stay at that venue, that they find where they can improve. Wasn't super crazy about it. Again, I only watched 40 laps. If I sit down and watch the whole thing, which I hope to, I might have a different opinion. But to me, based off of what people were saying on Twitter, what I've discussed with some others, and then as well watching those last 40 laps, it just seemed like, it was not the best. But I agree with you. I think this is probably the most intriguing as of right now of the points battles. I mean, coming into tonight's race, you got John Hunter, Zane Smith, Ben Rhodes, and Chandler Smith, 1, 2, 3, 4, all within 14 points of each other. And you have to remember that regular season championship, that's 15 playoff points. That's the equivalent of winning 3 races. That is a huge advantage for the trucks this year, because, I mean, right now I'm looking, John Hunter coming into this race, if he was seeded first, would enter with 2,023 points. Zane Smith is the only person who would have more at 2,030 because he's already got 3 wins. So, I think, especially if Zane Smith wins the regular season championship, that's a really big advantage for him, because that's going to put him soaring above the rest of the competition with his 3 wins and the equivalent of 3 more. And that essentially is what I'm looking at right now with the trucks, because something like that, you can ride those extra 15 points. I feel like maybe they're a little closer together than I'm making them out to be. Definitely one bad race can hurt, but it's still, especially again, if Zane or John Hunter, because they've got a little bit more playoff point. Although Ben Rhodes is up there too. He's got 21 right now. That's huge. You can ride that into the Final Four. We've seen it on the Cup side. We've seen it in the Xfinity and the trucks before too. Not as common, but we've seen it. So that battle for that regular season championship, that's what I'm looking at for the most part over the next 6 weeks, including tonight. John Hunter, I know he's already had some type of issue. He hit something. I don't know if it was the wall or another truck, and now they're reporting maybe possible light damage because he seems like he's still running and he's still pretty solid. Light damage to the right front fender of that truck. Zane Smith right now, I believe, is leading. Yeah, he's leading. Zane Smith has been so impressive this season. It's unbelievable. And then you've got Ben Rhodes, Chandler Smith. I can't quite find Chandler Smith is fifth. Don't see Rhodes at the moment, so won't go too deep into that. But it's going to be a really interesting battle, especially given that they only have a few races left.
Yeah, I mean, we talking about the track prep and what was going on there. I mean, they had a huge berm on the inside, essentially a massive curb that was akin to being about like 3/4 height of where the wheels were. And so that's part of what probably sent Jessica Zemkin Friesen flipping that they faux missed with their outstanding coverage. But it's not it doesn't have a lot of banking. ARCA runs on mile flat dirt tracks. And generally speaking, those races are similar. And that was back whether Tony was driving with Frank Kimmel and the Larry Clement team back in the early 2000s or now. NASCAR, it's a nice novelty. If you have a lot of power and you have types of cars that are really meant for that, like a sprint car, wing or non-wing, a midget, or a late model, that's what it's meant for. I think if you're going to go race dirt, you need to make cars that are more meant for it or vehicles that are more meant for it. Josh, I mean, like you mentioned it, Joe, about, tracks. SRX is going to finish, and we'll talk about it later in the roundup. They're going to race at 2 racetracks that probably would be great racetracks. They left one that was a perfectly good racetrack, and they made a bunch of upgrades for NASCAR. Had a Wednesday night special that was one of the most favorite races people showed up for. It was the middle of the week. They got sponsors every year. They always seem to have a different sponsor, but they had sponsors. Stu Ball won his first truck race there too. And they made sure Tony and him didn't get together because I think Tony would have beat the shit out of him. But they had a track, and then every year the prep or whatever NASCAR wanted made the track worse. And then they just decided, we don't want to go there anymore. We're going to go to Knoxville. And it's like Knoxville is a flat track that you need to have a lot of horsepower. You need to be able to pull the outside, pull that cushion. And when you have a sprint car, a 410 sprint car, the way they prep the track versus how they prep the track for a truck is totally different. But then you add the fact that a truck has 450 horsepower or whatever the hell they have them on with these crappy Ilmor engines. And then they have a sprint car has 900 horsepower or whatever the hell. So you're able to
do the weight. The trucks are way heavier than any sprint car.
Trucks are 3,400 pounds and have no downforce, and they drive like dogs. I mean, they've made them into like twisted sister vehicles, kind of like the crappy looking ARCA cars of today. They've made them kind of into twisted sister vehicles. So none of it fits. It's like, at what point do you just decide, okay, let's do it? If you want to make Bristol, I mean, I don't get it. You're ruining a perfectly good racetrack when it's concrete, and you need to do the dirt thing as a novelty. And they fucked it up for the trucks, and they had to come back and do it again and all this. And fine, you do it at Bristol. You want to do that and then make the night race at Bristol, the night race weekend at Bristol, and have that. Okay, fine. You have your 2 events. All right, fine. That's it. We don't need more dirt races with the trucks. Nobody cares, really. And the truck racing quality, considering a lot of the drivers that are in it, it makes it more like we shouldn't be doing that anymore. Josh, I mean, Todd Gilliland needed this win. DGR, Ford has struggled this year, outside of Zane Smith, of course, but the DGR team itself hasn't had a lot of luck unless they've had somebody that has some semblance of talent in their 17 truck. Ryan Preece has done some work. He qualified on pole tonight. He's won at this racetrack before in this truck. Todd driving for his dad officially wins for his dad on Father's Day weekend, so that's pretty cool. But when you get into it, I think the takeaway is, Todd Gilliland comes through, leads the second most laps. Hocevar had a vehicle to win, and he's right on the cusp. One of these days, he's going to win a race. I don't know where, but he's going to win a race. And he'll have his story. Oh, I broke my leg and did all this crap, but I still won a race. And I think if he was and he's a beneficiary, I think we could take it in that sense. We have this great points battle, but I think if there's somebody that could really sneak in and get crazy with it, there's a lot of vibes with this Carson Hocevar, and they're similar to Ross Chastain from a couple of years ago, when he went on his heater and then switched his points, went and jumped in the 45 truck full time, won more, and then they literally had their worst race of the year in the final race of the year. Or else we might be talking about Ross Chastain as a Truck Series champion. We might be talking about him as a Cup Series champion here in a few months' time, but that was a precursor to what we have now with Ross Chastain. In regards to Carson Hocevar, though, his rise through the ranks is legitimate, and he is the real deal. He's aggressive, raw in certain ways, but he's got a ton of potential, and Ross Chastain really believes in him, and so does Nice Motorsports. And what he does in those vehicles pales in comparison to, or is a totally different. He's driving a totally different vehicle than any of his other teammates, because the rest of his teammates are trash, and he goes out there and he does work. So, I guess we'll take in both those angles. Talking about Todd Gilliland, he's had a rough year this year, Josh, but he goes and does something for his dad. He goes and wins for his dad on Father's Day weekend. And then you look at Carson Hocevar, who, battling through injury. One of these days he's going to win one for sure.
Yeah, definitely one of these days, I think Carson Hocevar is going to finally win. It's not a matter of if, but when. He's been good, the last month and a half in this series, basically since, I think, Dirt Bristol, all the way back in the beginning of, beginning of April. So, we'll see what happens when they go to the next race. If, Hocevar, well, of course they are racing right now, so don't know where Hocevar is in the field, but he's gonna get there eventually, and once he wins a race, it's gonna turn the truck playoff field upside down, because you talked about earlier, Joe. You talked about John Hunter having the points lead, and they're all within a 14-point range, down to Chandler Smith in fourth place. Well, if Hocevar is able to win, that puts him in contention for the championship in the playoffs, and possibly even the regular season championship. So those 5 guys are probably the class of the field currently in the Truck Series, and I think 4 of those 5 guys will probably be in the championship 4 when we head to Phoenix at the beginning of November here later this year. So we'll see what happens. And then you talked about Todd Gilliland finally winning for his dad, first time, shockingly his first time ever racing for his dad, but it almost doesn't seem like it, because I mean, he already had raced the 38 truck in the truck series before, but of course that one is basically owned by Bob Jenkins, the food, he owns the Jenkins Racing, not Bob Jenkins, the broadcaster who passed away last year. But Todd Gilliland going out and winning for his dad, it's got to be a good feeling doing it on Father's Day weekend like that, of course. I mean, I did not catch a whole lot of this race either, but going back to what you guys were talking about earlier about the track being, the difference between Knoxville being a long track, with flat turns, narrow turns, compared to some place like Eldora, which is very wide, has banking, and there's not a whole lot of straight. You're basically almost turning almost the entire lap for the most part at Eldora, so it works well for the trucks. And places like that, Bristol dirt kind of works well for the trucks as well. And you're able to use the high line, use the cushion, as they say in the dirt racing world, and make up a lot of time, momentum running that line. Whereas the line's a whole lot different for Knoxville. You're kind of more in the middle of the racetrack there with the trucks. So all that combined with the truck being very heavy and not as much horsepower as what the sprint cars run, and it's not going to turn out to be very great racing. And I think in general, it seems like the dirt cars, or not dirt cars, but flat tracks don't really work well with stock cars. And look at New Hampshire. There's not really been that memorable racing in New Hampshire outside of the modified series. Of course, they run the restrictor plates over there on that asphalt track, not a dirt track, but still very flat. Not a whole lot of racing there. Indianapolis, flat track, and hasn't worked well for the Cup cars, and now they're running road course. I mean, I think the only flat track in general that really works well is Martinsville, and of course it's a short track, a lot of heavy braking, but with a place like New Hampshire, Indianapolis, other places that have flat corners, doesn't really seem well to work for stock cars. So not really surprised when you go to dirt, where not a whole lot of grip, and you really have to run a technical line around the racetrack. He doesn't have a whole lot of good racing there. It's turns into a very technical race when other cars, series, different classes of racing that run that track, like sprint cars, it's run the way it's supposed to. And when you try it with trucks, it doesn't really work out that way. So we'll see if they return next year, but I would rather probably see them at Eldora, like you said, Phil. So instead of Knoxville, so we'll see what happens. But definitely, not the greatest race, and not certainly a disaster. But we could probably do without Knoxville with the Truck Series.
And believe me, I love Knoxville. I mean, Donnie Schatz is a 10-time Knoxville Nationals winner. I mean, minus the fact that tool Brad Sweets won a couple times in a row or whatever. I love that racetrack. It's a great racetrack. It's just not meant for trucks. NASCAR's not big on taking L's and actually owning up to them. It seems like they are. There's some news, a lot of news there on J-Ski and whatever. In regards to cautions or a bunch of other news we'll get into here later, but in a few moments' time. But it's okay. It doesn't work. They need to bring short track racing. They need to bring the trucks back to more short tracks. If SRX can do it, and they can do it for 6 weeks, and they can go to Sharon Speedway, which is Dave Blaney's track, or the Blaney family track, and they can go to Peevely I-55 Speedway, which is Ken Trader's track, NASCAR can go there. If you're going to Five Flag Speedway, then NASCAR can go there. If not, in North Wilkesboro Speedway is being brought back, NASCAR can go there. I don't give a fuck what they say about guardrails and this and that and the other thing. If NASCAR, with all the damn money they have, can't go and invest in the racetracks, then they really shouldn't be a damn sanctioning body trying to go and put on racing. I know they want to make NASCAR into wrestling, but the fact of the matter is it's racing. And if you really want to invest in a sport, you should be putting more money into the pockets, or giving more money for some of these teams to show up, and actually giving tracks giving the tracks an onus to actually want to hold races. Tony did that, and they fucked him over. And nobody said anything, but let's be clear. I think Tony was like telling him, you guys are messing with my product and you're messing with things. And you give an inferior product with bad tire and all this. You didn't give it. The racing got progressively worse every year to the point where they blamed the track, but it wasn't the track's fault. It's not Tony Stewart's fault when he can hold $1 million races for late models, sprint cars, and all that. It's not his fault. Knoxville Raceway is one of the greatest dirt tracks ever. And people all over the world come for the Knoxville Nationals. But when the trucks race there, it's a clusterfuck. Own it. It's part of the problem with NASCAR. They can't own when they're wrong. They can't own the fact that their vehicles are not meant for certain things. They're not meant for running on a 1.33 mile concrete, somewhat mid-banked oval. They say Pocono's terrible racing. If you go to Pocono, it's great. It's one of the best fan experiences in the world, but people hate it because TV doesn't do it justice. It's the same thing with New Hampshire. I'm pretty sure you have fun there. I've never really heard anything bad about the fan experience at New Hampshire, even with SMI taking over. But watching races in New Hampshire is horrible. It's the same way as watching in Phoenix. It's what Richmond has become, unfortunately. Richmond has basically jumped the shark a few years ago. The Gen 6 car really, the Gen 5 and the Gen 6 car really jumped the shark with that track to now where Richmond is not a great racetrack. But they're not going to lose their dates. But, it is what it is. We'll see what Ben Kennedy has in mind for some of these schedules, because it's up to him to go and make these schedules for these series and what he's expecting or what he's looking for. It would be nice if they had a little more variety and they had ovals that were, they run short tracks. I think Kern County Speedway would be a great addition if they were trying to do a little West Coast swing. Try to do Irwindale, maybe an idea. That's the kind of tracks you should be going to. You shouldn't be going to frickin' Knoxville. Oh, there goes Tanner Gray. That's a blown tire. And that should be a yellow. He blew a right front tire while battling with Todd Bodine. But, oh well. We'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with Truck Series as we go along. As I mentioned... Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, Phil. Just I don't mean to interrupt, but you're talking about the schedule, and I just wanted to hijack this for a quick second because the way I feel, what you're saying about introducing different racetracks, more racetracks, I actually feel like over the past few years that is the direction that NASCAR has gone, and I actually feel like that's a product that stems back all the way to the introduction of the Charlotte Roval, right? Fans started talking, maybe, 2 races. There's so many quad oval races. We don't necessarily need this. NASCAR, Marcus Smith saw an opportunity. They had the Roval race. Product was very successful in its first and second year. So much so that since 2020, since the pandemic, we've seen more new racetracks and more new configurations in the last, since 2018, than we had in the prior 20 years in the Cup Series. So they're definitely moving that direction. And actually, based off of some comments, I don't remember if it was Ben Kennedy that made them, but based off some comments that a NASCAR official made about the schedule, I want to say it was maybe end of last year. They're definitely starting to move toward potentially more similar to Formula One, where they don't race multiple times at a track in a given year. Now, I do think you have a few racetracks that will have a second date pretty much in any given year. I think Daytona and Talladega will pretty much always have 2 dates, and I think Bristol in some form and Martinsville will pretty much always have 2 dates. Outside of that, truthfully, I'm not sure that any other track needs to have 2 races. For as much as I love Darlington, and I was very excited when they announced it was going to get a second date, I don't necessarily know that it needs 2 dates. I think it would be fine just running the one time on Labor Day weekend, the Southern 500. But definitely, it seems to be the direction that they're moving. And in fact, and I usually don't like talking about rumors. However, there have been some rumors that have popped up. One in particular about the schedule has been circulating Reddit and Twitter over the past few days, really. About a week ago, maybe, is when I first saw it. But they're talking right now, of course. NASCAR is working hard at formulating the 2023 schedule. And I saw a tweet from someone, and it was reposted to Reddit. And the tweet had basically said that their friend, the person who tweeted, their friend, was trying to renew a Kansas Cup ticket or something along that line, and that they had been told that there was only one race for Kansas for 2023, July 8th, and that essentially Road America would have its date stripped from it. They've only been there once so far. It'll be twice, July 4th weekend for Cup. And that in its place, they were going to have a race at the Chicago Street Course, which was something that NASCAR experimented with last year on iRacing. And that in place of the second Kansas race, that we were going to get a race at Chicagoland back. And there seems to be some very mixed reactions. I think for the most part, everybody seems okay if, again, this is a rumor that it's not 100%. A lot of people seem to be okay with, I think really ever since Chicagoland has been taken away, fans have been vocal, and I've been vocal too. I've been part of that, saying Chicago needs to be back on the schedule. In fact, at Fansided, I've written 2 different articles about mock-up schedules and kind of what are some things we might see and what we want to see. One was for 2022. One I just published last month for 2023. And both of those articles had, we want Chicago back, and we might be getting it. Again, I wouldn't rely on it. I don't know how credible this source is or how credible that conversation was. Mistakes happen. Something might have been misinterpreted. So it is just a rumor. But I think that really does go to prove that NASCAR is moving in that direction of we're going to have the same amount of races, but we're going to go to more tracks. We're going to reduce dates for other tracks. And that is sort of kind of the way they're going. So they're definitely going to new venues. That would be in the form of possibly the Chicago Street Course next year. And they're also going back to old venues, right? Road America 2021 was actually not the inaugural race. The inaugural race happened in the 1960s or 50s, I believe. They only ran one race. Remembers it. So, it's not just about turning or going to new tracks. It's also about returning to older venues where maybe they only raced a few times, or maybe NASCAR didn't see as much immediate success. Or in the case of Chicagoland, I think it just kind of fell victim to COVID. When they removed it, they had to remove it in 2020. Didn't return for 2021 or 2022. And maybe, with the fan being as vocal about that particular track, see it as an opportunity to use it. So it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with the schedule. I think that's among the more fascinating news that is swirling around more people. I've definitely heard other rumors, not going to get into those just because I don't have credible backup for that. But it does seem like NASCAR is interested in getting to more racetracks.
Well, let's hope so. I mean, the truck schedule has been wonky for a while. They had 25 races for a while. Now they're at 23. I think the problem is with the purses and the way the structure they have that series at. It's not very good. I mean, basically Kyle Busch. If it wasn't for like Kyle Busch and Duke and Rhonda Thorson and Al Neese and and David Gilliland and maybe a couple other people, the truck series would be dead. Like in the Cup Series, you only have 36 cars showing up a lot of these weeks because they've taken away the open money to go and basically solidify the chartered cars. That's been a good thing for the likes of, which we'll get into more details once we get into Nashville talk, but talking about Trackhouse and Colleague and a couple other teams probably. But new teams aren't going to come into the sport because you need a charter. Dale Earnhardt Jr. can't afford a charter. I mean, I think he could, but he ain't trying to pay that kind of money. I think he likes being one of the big dogs in the Xfinity series. So, we'll see what happens with all that. But yeah, with the tracks and all, I mean, there are tracks, there are options. NASCAR's goofy rules. The SRX, which we're going to get into, they're racing at South Boston Speedway tomorrow. They had Busch racing there for decades. Why aren't they racing at South Boston Speedway? They race in the middle of nowhere for all these other a bunch of crappy places in the middle of nowhere. But you had great racing at South Boston Speedway. You had great racing at all these other Indianapolis Raceway Park. You got away from IRP. Why? I mean, there's whatever the hell they call Lucas Oil Raceway Park. There's so many instances of that, and maybe Ben Kennedy can fix that. Maybe they'll fix that. Because the Truck Series, that's where they should be. They should be racing at South Boston. They should be racing at IRP. And so should the Xfinity Series, for that matter. Because they raced there from the original season, and then they decided, oh no, we're going to have to run at Indianapolis in front of 24 people. And have a 250-mile race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway for nobody to give a fuck about. That was like the highlight of Ty Dillon's career. But it's, I don't know. Let's see. We got through all that, went through the trucks, and the terrible coverage, of course, but then that's not going to change. No matter who they have announcing, they should actually have the people there. The way that Fox does races, it makes you think they don't want to be involved in it, but then they're busy going and trying to kill the country, so they don't really care about how they cover NASCAR. So, F them. They're paying Tom Brady $350 million or whatever the fuck they're going to pay him, acting like he's going to be better than Tony Romo. And
he hasn't even done anything yet.
Yeah. And it's like Tom Brady, even in the match, whenever he's been on the match, hasn't been that great. Honestly, like he's funny, he's corny, but it's like, if you're going to tell me, oh, I'm going to hire a quarterback to do TV, I'll hire. I mean, Aaron's an asshole by trade. I'll hire Aaron any day to do TV because I know he won't give a fuck. He'll say whatever it is. He'll be like Barkley. He's more like, I want somebody that's more like Barkley than a guy who's a cake eater. And Tom's not going to be able to go and say the kind of things. Tony Romo's he was a nobody when he got in the league, and he went and became this guy, and he became a big star because he was a Dallas Cowboys quarterback. And then he's now with the guy in Nance, who, when Nance isn't putting himself over, actually does put over his analysts, his co-worker, whatever. And Romo's really smart. Nobody knew. He's just this goofy looking guy, but he's a really sharp guy. I mean, it's kind of like we're going to get into the NBC discussion, how good Dale Jr. has been. He's the closest thing. Like, I was watching clips of the download earlier with Phil Parsons, and essentially Dale Earnhardt Jr. is the closest thing to Benny Parsons we've had since Benny Parsons. And Dale Earnhardt Jr. in retirement has been one of the only things that's kept me interested in this sport. And I just like the realness of Junior. He's so genuine, and it's real. And for what he's went through and the crap that's happened to him, all the concussions and other things that probably have been swept under the rug too, but the concussions and all the things he's gone through. And he's built this great business with his sister, probably in the light of his dad, the fact that that's what DEI should have been. The fact that he's got this great broadcasting career too, and people love him. And he cares so much about racing. He's one of the only people left that actually is trying to keep the history of motorsports going, talking about those stories, talking to the people that matter. And I mean, I just from the clips of the Phil Parsons interview, I think it's funny. Like I went on like a rabbit hole of watching different clips from the download, and I forget who it was. Oh, it was Andy Petrie talking about Phil, and they had their funniest Phil Parsons story, and Andy throws one story in, and then Dale Jr. comes back with the one story about him trying to give his steering wheel to Bobby Allison, and he almost killed himself trying because he didn't cut the freaking wire off or some crap back in like 1985 or something. I'm like, that's some good shit right there. It shows how goofy Phil Parsons was, but it also tells you, but you see how genuine Phil Parsons is. And he has that, and the point is, Phil Parsons for many years has been this great broadcaster, but you live in the shadow of your big brother, who's one of the greatest broadcasters ever. But he didn't care. He F up. He said Randy LaJoie was shot out of a canyon, which is one of my favorite lines ever. And then he'd always yell, Randy! So then, like I had an old friend named Randy, I would yell that sometime. But Bob, Benny, and Ned and the whole that thing. Dale Jr. needs like an Alan Bestwick. And then him and Letarte have this good interplay together. And I mean, Burton doesn't really add anything for me, but he's there. I think if they had Dale Jarrett, Dale Jr., and Alan Bestwick, NBC would have an amazing broadcast booth. You have Letarte down there as the fourth guy on pit road, literally going and scoping around, or they have him in the studio somewhere in North Carolina doing the Larry McReynolds thing, but they have him chime in more than Larry does. That would be the proper broadcast booth. But we'll get in. I went off in a little tangent over there with that, but there's been a lot of news stories. We talked about it offline. Those passing of Bruton Smith, a man who went and saved Charlotte Motor Speedway, went broke trying to save Charlotte Motor Speedway, then brought it back, and then him and Humpy Wheeler built one of the greatest speedways there is. They were the first people to bring lights to a big track. One hot night, one of the greatest all-star races ever. Davey wasn't awake to celebrate his victory because he was in the hospital because he got a concussion. And they destroyed their best race car in the process. But then he did okay. He didn't win the 600. He won the 600 the year before. But all the things Bruton Smith brought, he tried to contend with NASCAR and make a separate series, which I think is what SRX essentially is, because the cars kind of have a similar look to kind of what they were going to do. A whole lot of things. I think Bruton Smith's been a big player in NHRA with the four wides and all these great massive drag strips they built. Not only redoing Bristol, but then building Las Vegas, building the Charlotte four wide. He's been a big part of motorsports for decades. His passing is something I think Marcus has taken a front role now to try and be that next generation. He's not as bombastic. He's not as big of a character in that way. He does quiet moves. And his first big move, as Joe brought up, was bringing the Roval into play. Having to follow in the footsteps of a father that was this innovator in a sense in motorsport tracks and making these mechas. He bought Bristol International Raceway in 1995. And then it became Bristol Motor Speedway, and then it became the Coliseum. It became a place that you could hold 180,000 people, wherever the hell it is you can hold in there, 160,000 people. And it became essentially a football stadium, which of course that happened. They actually had a football game there last year, 2 years ago, whatever. You had a stadium racetrack, which is why I think Ben Kennedy is like, oh, let's go to the LA Coliseum. Let's go and run the All-Star race there. Well, there you go. It's probably because Bruton Smith just made a Coliseum in freaking Bristol, Tennessee. Charlotte Motor Speedway led to the hellhole that is Texas Motor Speedway. I mean, I'm sorry, Bruton. That is a shithole, and I don't care what you did. God bless your soul. Place is one of the worst racetracks on the history of planet Earth. But you can't be good everywhere. You had Charlotte, Atlanta Motor Speedway is one of the great tracks. It used to be, at least. I'm not so sure about today. In the 1992 championship there, Jeffy won, locked up 3 of his 4 championships at Atlanta Motor Speedway. There's all these great racetracks and all these great things and all the pomp and circumstance. Before we move forward, I guess, Josh, what were your thoughts when you heard about the passing of Bruton Smith, and what things that you've noticed or thought of that were great things that he brought to motorsport? I think also making ISC and the France family actually have to work in regards to their end of the bargain to provide certain services, even though, I mean, we could question on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bruton Smith was a big figure in the sport, and helped bring in or grow the sport from where it began, the back to where Charlotte was in the 1960s to where it is today. I mean, that's his creation or part of it, with modernizing it and everything, and buying out Bristol Motor Speedway and making it into the Coliseum that it is today, and expanding it to what it is, because it didn't used to look like this great stadium looking Coliseum that it is right now. It was just a small little hairpin racetrack that didn't have a whole lot of grandstands. And now since the mid 90s when he took over, switched it to concrete, expanded the grandstands, built a whole lot of things, brought in or helped bring in the what do you call it, the Colossus, the big screen that place has, suspended by cables, and swapping out North Wilkesboro for Texas Motor Speedway. A lot of people didn't really agree with that one. Bringing NASCAR to Las Vegas, so he helped expand and grow NASCAR, although maybe at some cost, because of course we effectively lost North Wilkesboro to Las Vegas. Although we are bringing North Wilkesboro back, his son, of course, finally investing into North Wilkesboro, and of course with the help of the government of state of North Carolina being able to invest into North Wilkesboro, but still someone that we should think of as someone who helped grow the sport to where it is today. So sad loss for sure, but his legacy can continue to live on with his son running SMI and being one of the stewards, I guess, of the sport today.
And Joe, I know we talked about that also offline. So what are your thoughts on the loss of Bruton Smith? I mean, it's been felt across. I mean, I brought up Donald Hawk, who used to work for SMI. That's a goal for the Colorado Avalanche. There you go. Nishukin just went and got a goal to tie the game. But Bruton Smith, there are so many people across motorsports that have been touched or had something to do or connection to him. And of course, like as Josh mentioned, his son now has that responsibility to follow in the footsteps. And it's always tough to be the son of, somebody who's so big. But to follow in the footsteps, I think it's similar to Ben Kennedy, what he has to deal with, being the grandson and a great-grandson of icons. But I think right now, we look at this sport right now, Bruton Smith, he did all this for his family, but Marcus has been made that guy. NASCAR, ISC, I mean, I think Ben Kennedy wanted to continue racing. He could have had an okay career. I think there are people that would have probably benefited if he had decided he wanted to move up, because they might have gotten help, kind of like Ferrari used to from FIA, the way that Red Bull seems to benefit from the FIA these days. But the fact is, we have this future. You talked about Ben Kennedy. Josh brought up Marcus Smith trying to bring it back, but I think that's a lot to do with Dale Jr. It all connects together what we've been talking about. But the loss of Bruton Smith is a big one in motorsport. You know, we lost of course, Bill France Jr. many years ago, and Martin Truex won his first race in 2007 at Dover on a Monday. And that was a big loss for the sport. And now we've lost Bruton Smith, but he's been out of the limelight for a while. But the amount of people he's connected with, big, great, legendary racers, and people that have been connected in the sport, it's a loss that it's a person that it's hard to replace. So big shoes to fill for sure.
Yeah, now Bruton Smith, I mean, almost every video I've ever seen him in, almost every picture I've ever seen him in, there's one thing that strikes me about all of it. He's always smiling. And that is, you know, when you see those, that's the smile of a man who loves what he's doing. It's the smile of a man who knows he has succeeded, and I don't mean just, you know, financially he's well off, but I mean he enjoys what he did, and he enjoyed the people he was around, both his family and his coworkers and everybody who contributed to Speedway Motorsports. That is the greatest success. It's not the money. It's not the fame. It's not any accomplishment, really, although that certainly does help him. To me, it was just always his attitude. He was always happy. I don't know if I've ever heard him or seen him upset. And, you know, to do something you love, that's one thing. To be good at something you love, that means so much more. And that's what Bruton Smith was. He was such an influential figure in so many ways. He held almost every position that you could imagine. He was a promoter. He, you know, went all the way up the line to being the owner of Speedway Motorsports, his own company. And, you know, really without a figure like him, NASCAR racing, there's a good chance could look very different today. Not in terms of, you know, the cars or the this or the that, but in terms of where they compete, on what types of tracks they compete. Because you think a lot about, you know, the SMI tracks, and there are a lot of 1.5 milers owned by Speedway Motorsports. You got Charlotte, you got Texas, you got Atlanta, Kansas, you know, a lot of 1.5 milers. And, you know, it definitely changed because for a long time throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s and even into the 2020s, a lot of racing on 1.5 miles. It was not something that was super common before tracks like Las Vegas and Kansas. Although Kansas, actually, I think I speaking correctly, Kentucky, not Kansas. Kansas is owned by ISC. But, you know, tracks like that definitely served influence on the places that NASCAR raced. And you could say, even for that matter, on the types of cars that they built. Because this next-gen car, its focus was to build a better product overall at every track, but particularly on those 1.5 miles where, you know, cars get strung out, and over the past few years, historically, where it's been hard to pass because of the package. So, you know, there's definitely influence that Bruton Smith had in other areas where he necessarily didn't even touch. You know, being in the Hall of Fame, rightfully earned, and that's where he'll remain. And that is where, you know, hopefully fans will go. And, you know, if they're younger fans who are not necessarily familiar with Bruton Smith, hopefully they familiarize themselves with Bruton Smith in their time at the Hall of Fame. You know, great guy, great person, great at what he did. And, you know, it's really, really sad. And I think I speak for all three of us when I say this, but thoughts and prayers with the Smith family. That's massive to lose a father, a brother, a husband, and then for the NASCAR community to lose one of its most revered figures. Now, touching on the topic of Marcus Smith, I know, you know, in particular with the SMI tracks, there have been some rather controversial decisions made in the past few years. I know the Roval was one of them. It ended up working out. Bristol Dirt was one of them. Fans seem to be pretty 50-50 on that. the reconfiguration of Texas, the reconfiguration of Atlanta. Very controversial things that Marcus Smith in a very short time has done. But I just want to remind everybody, especially because, you always see the hate on social media, and I feel like poor Marcus gets a lot. Marcus Smith is not Bruton Smith. Dale Earnhardt Jr. was not Dale Earnhardt, who was not Ralph Earnhardt. Kyle Petty was not Richard Petty, who was not Lee Petty. It goes on and on and on to all the families in NASCAR. Ben Kennedy is not Brian Kennedy or Brian France or anyone, right? So you have to remember, times are different, people are different. Don't be so hard on Marcus Smith because he's not his father. Is every move, is every call that he makes best? Maybe not. But don't give him such a hard time, right? He's Marcus Smith. Let him be Marcus Smith. Don't force him to be Bruton Smith. Because that, for all intents and purposes, is probably worse than letting Marcus Smith be Marcus Smith. Because when you force somebody to be someone who they aren't, it gets sloppy. It's no good. So be nice, especially on Twitter. Be nice to Marcus Smith, even if you don't always agree with what he's doing. And poor Marcus, he does now kind of have the attention that once surrounded Bruton Smith. He's now got that on his shoulders, and that's an additional thing he's got to worry about on top of all, maneuvering tracks, this and that, and potential reconfigurations that may be in the works that we don't know about. So, just keep that in mind before you say anything. But definitely looking for him, Marcus Smith, to continue to wow us. I mean, look, Charlotte Roval was fantastic. I think that was the best idea that has been had for NASCAR probably since the turn of the century. Definitely, I think the most influential for our future of the sport. So, he's got a lot of weight on his shoulders, and he's going to do his thing.
And he's friends with Dale Jr., so that might protect him a little bit. He's close with Dale Jr. That might be the one thing that keeps him from getting completely flamed. I need to now I feel bad because both you guys have the whole arm thing set up with the mics, and then I still have my cheap shit. I need to get a better job or something, or I need to start making money.
I gotta link us up with that mic, though. I like that mic, Jill.
Thank you. I figured, you know what? I've been on the show enough. It was time to get a little more professional. I figured it's time to get a microphone. I do other the projects on the side, of course, that this serves purpose for, but I just wanted to show off, I guess.
Well, yeah, so now I have to go and upgrade. I need a better job or something. I need to start making money bowling or something. I can do that. We're getting there. We're working at it. I'm paying the price in certain ways, but the fact is I'm also, because I have enough bowling balls that you'd swear that I actually am like a tour, I'm borderline like a tour professional the way I have bowling balls. It's my addictive personality. I have a thing with that and die-cast cars and other stuff. So when I get into something, I go all in. That's what it is. The same way as a GSP. Even though it's laissez-faire at certain times, I'm all in on this, and I'm going to ride this one out all the way. Even when I have kids, God willing, I'm going to have this deal. So we'll get into all that. I mean, Joe, you brought up there's some news. I mean, I was, because I'm looking at stuff for the roundup here. I mean, Brody Kostecki, a former NASCAR Next competitor, Australian driver, somebody who came here and ran K&N and stuff like that. He's looking at trying to dovetail his supercars career, full-time supercars career, with road courses. One of the pieces that we're going to get into in the roundup also involves a certain guy with a dash in his actual name, that will probably be in the Daytona 500 next year. But there's been a couple of other news items, and I saw on J-Ski there's some stuff out there But what have you seen? And Josh, obviously, you can throw in here Ricky Stenhouse. Oh,
Oh,
Richard.
Richard.
There you go. It had to happen. I'm glad you came right in on that. If Adam was here, that would have been good. Too. That would have been perfect. He would have went real long on that one. I'm not as good as I used to be. 10 years ago, I'd have really owned that. But he's got an extension with JTG Doherty, probably due in part because Brad's working on NBC to afford his salary for whatever the hell you're paying him to run 10th to 20th every week. And then that Truax kid from Mayetta, New Jersey, is back for one more year before he gets forced out for Ty Gibbs. The force out isn't happening because they didn't have enough options. They didn't have options. It's funny. The sponsorship wasn't there, and they knew that it probably wasn't going to be a good idea to hurry Ty up because they already saw what happened when they hurried a young driver that was probably that was raw and would ruffle some feathers and probably wasn't the right idea in Joey Logano. Then they screwed Eric Jones over, and now Christopher Bell's in no man's land. So they're like, okay, let's just sign who we have because he has a good relationship with James Small and all this. They'll run one more year. Ty Gibbs will be in that car. I figure Kyle Busch is not leaving. I think it would be amazing if that happened. It would be bad for Toyota, honestly, if he left, because that would be the end of their Truck Series program. So I kind of want him to go. I saw something on YouTube earlier where they were like, "Oh, where could he go?" And then they had a mock-up of him going to the 10 car, and I'm like, "Oh, that's something." I might actually have to like Kyle Busch. It's like hell freezing over. But yeah, it's like it's kind of like how I like Jimmy Johnson now, even though he sucks in an Indy car. But I root for Jimmy Johnson, even though he's part of the reason why Tony Stewart only has 49 Cup wins and 3 championships. But you know, there's those two pieces. Martin Truex coming back next year was the first domino for Joe Gibbs. I mean, you know, what is it called? JD's guy is Denny Hamlin, so he ain't never leaving. Between that and FedEx, he ain't leaving. He's gonna get to call a shot. Worst case, he gets to move the charter, and there's some money deal. They'll ask Michael Jordan to sell a couple of pairs of sneakers, cut a check to Joe Gibbs, and they'll have another charter mysteriously come out of thin air. But you know, I think Kyle Busch is probably staying there. I think for all intents and purposes, Joe Gibbs Racing is set for next year, but we already know what's coming. We know Ty Gibbs is likely going to be in the 19 car, and he's going to have some big shoes to fill because Carl Edwards, they made that team from scratch as a 4th team, and they bought Carl Edwards off of Ford and Roush, and they were a championship team when he decided to quit. Then they had Suarez, who they really didn't. Let's be clear, based on what he's doing in a Trackhouse car, they really didn't give him a fair shot. Tony knows they didn't give him a fair shot in the 41 car too. Now he's a good driver, but they built him up, made him a Xfinity champion. He went through the whole drive from D for D, and they had him with the Aris sponsorship, of course, with Carlos Slim, and then they ran Joe Gibbs ran Barney Visser out of the sport intentionally so he could go and get Martin Truex and Cole Pern, and they almost got the one championship there a couple of years ago that Kyle ended up getting his second championship, and then now he's been there with James Small, Aussie guy, used to work in the V8 Supercars Championship, has a lot of connections there. And so they have that relationship. They're still around. They're competitive. But it's not the same as what Martin Truex had with Cole Pern. So I guess with all of that, I'll look at J-Ski while you guys get into some of the news. Josh, I'll throw to you first. Martin Truex signing back for one more year. Stenhouse, Richard gets another year so that he can go and take care of the wedding he's going to have to this new fiance of his. I don't know if he bought Danica Patrick's bolt-ons. I don't think he did, but she got rid of them recently. But in the case of Ricky Stenhouse, he's going to stay at JTG Doherty. I didn't know he was a free agent, really. I think it's interesting because there are some Xfinity guys that could have been in play for that car that might have made sense as well, maybe, for that ride. That might have been a better idea, cheaper option than Ricky Stenhouse, who's a guy who's won a couple of cup races but hasn't really done much in recent years.
Well, I mean, Martin Truex, first off, I mean, what a simple announcement. I'm coming back, very similar to Michael Jordan when he came back to the Chicago Bulls. Just one announcement, 2 words, I'm back. And that set the, I've watched The Last Dance, that set off the news media and everybody back in, 1995 and all that stuff. But very similar quote here, I'm coming back. And talked about, I think, earlier he talked about how long it took for him to come to that decision. It took him about 6 months into this year, so decides to come back in 2024 and beyond. Probably have to wait another 6 months for him to make that decision, but we'll see how long he decides to stay in the Cup Series. Just seems like he hasn't been performing as much or as well this year as he has in years past. But of course, everybody's kind of been inconsistent with the new car. There hasn't, I mean, Chase Elliott's leading the point standings, but outside of Trackhouse racing, it seems like everybody's kind of hit or miss on this car every week. And of course, that leads to the parity level that we've seen this year. But we'll see, how Truex is. Maybe we'll see how long he decides to stay in the series. With especially his girlfriend, life partner, Sherry Pollux, of course, having her issues with ovarian cancer. We'll see, how long she decides, or how long he decides to stay in the series, and before you maybe retire to take care of her and continue to run their foundation and all that stuff. And of course, you mentioned Ricky Stenhouse. Of course, he was a free agent after this year, but they decide to lock him up long term, and feel like this might be kind of similar to the deals that they made with AJ Allmendinger, who seemed like he was very mid-level in that team, and then they would sign him to multi-year extensions, 5-year extensions, and it seems like every other season that when he was on that team, they were signing him to an extension. So, excuse me. So, I feel like it's kind of similar to that. And probably in 2 or 3 years, we'll see another extension for Stenhouse if he doesn't move, or if he decides to, or doesn't decide to move to another team in the Cup Series, or wherever. So, I think as long as he continues to run well, he'll probably be at JTG long term.
And Joe, you can throw in there.
Yep, I'll jump in. So, with the Truex move, I definitely, I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I saw that one coming. I really kind of thought that he was done. He said something to the effect of, I'm very grateful for the people who have helped me throughout my career. Basically the type of thing you would say when you're retiring, but you're not saying that you're going to retire. So I think most likely what you guys have said is pretty much spot on. I think that 2023 will be the swan song season. He'll have his farewell tour. And I think it would take something really extreme for him to reconsider, quite honestly. He's been in the sport for a long time, and I think a lot of people fail to recognize that sometimes, because for a while he was not very successful. He got the one win with DEI. I believe it was either his second or his third season there in 2007, full-time, of course, where he was driving that one car. And he went many, many years really without making much noise, right? He got his next win, his second career win came in 2013, 6 years after getting that first win. That's a long time. And then, of course, went on his tear starting in early 2015. He showed some flashes of greatness. In 2016, obviously had an incredible year, arguably a championship contender. Went pretty far into the playoffs. Just luck was not on their side. And then, of course, 2017 having that amazing championship year. 2018 almost going back to back, one position short. 2019 again, another really competitive year for that team, and even 2020 was a decent year for the team. Wasn't as good as past years, but you could definitely tell that switch between Cole Pearn and James Small made a big difference. The level of competitiveness on the week to week for that team definitely dropped after James Small was paired with Truex. And I don't necessarily know that has anything to do with James Small himself. It might just be, very similar to how some drivers just need a new crew chief because they can't really, communicate clearly with them, not only from the week to week during the race, but back at their shop. I mean, look at, I always say, when a situation like this comes up, I say, look at Dale Jr., right? In his crew chiefs went from Tony Uri Jr., who had been his crew chief for a few years at that point, got switched out for Lance McGrew, who I really don't even know that he lasted more than a season and a half. And then eventually it's Steve Letarte, and the two of them paired up, and it was a whole different ballgame for Dale Jr. after that. So, it could just be a matter of the communication between the two, or some dynamic between the two of them that we're not necessarily seeing. That is causing that difference that we saw from the Cole Pearn era to the James Small era. But I definitely think 2023 is going to be a swan song season. I think if he's got any shot of re-signing, probably on his terms alone, because I think Gibbs would keep him as long as they probably could. He's a pretty positive figure for the sport. He's pretty outspoken. Good figure for Toyota. He's competitive. Even still, I know we haven't seen it so much this season, but he's someone good to have around for a number of reasons on top of just being competitive. So, I think if Truex goes after 23, which I do think is a likely option, it'll be on his own terms. It's not necessarily going to be that he's forced out or such. But I also feel like, it would take something really extreme for him to reconsider at that point, because if he is going on his own terms truly, it may be harder, right? If he wins, 5 or 6 races from now until, let's say a year from now when they're talking another contract extension, then it's a different story, right? You've won 5 or 6 races. You might have been in championship contention in 22. But really at his performance rate at this level, or I guess at this point in time, I'm not necessarily sure that he's going to want to stick around. As far as Ricky Stenhouse goes, one detail that I noticed that intrigued me was I didn't actually see a number tied to that multi-year extension. I don't know how long that extension is. I don't know if either of you guys have seen that or if anybody listening has seen that number. But I actually, Josh, much like you, I didn't realize he was a free agent this year. And very interesting. I was a little shocked when I heard he was re-signed. Not like Truex, because I was kind of expecting him to retire, but I really didn't even know that was on the table. I definitely wonder if they talked to anybody else, if they had spoken maybe with the likes of Noah Gragson, who I think at this point is probably next to Ty Gibbs for the two people of when are they going to move to Cup. Ty Gibbs was a little bit of a different situation because Joe Gibbs kind of came out and said, yeah, we're not really ready for that yet. But with Gragson now, he's done a few years in Xfinity, and I think we kind of see that he's on the brink perhaps of moving in a Cup in the next few years. I think he's might have to win an Xfinity championship before that, and if he keeps performing the way he started this year, could definitely be this year. But that was definitely interesting. I wasn't really expecting to see that type of news today, especially not from two stables, but really interesting in that perspective. Again, don't know how long Stenhouse is going to be over there, and depending on whenever that next contract year for him is, and who's around at that point and available, could dictate whether or not he's in that 47 any longer. But as far as Truex goes, he's probably, I imagine, we're probably talking 2023, his last year, and at that point, Ty Gibbs will have had a lot more time to refine his skill in Xfinity, and he'll probably step into the 19 come 2024. Another piece of news, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, only because, again, this is not necessarily a set in stone thing. However, this one does come from a far more credible source than what I was speaking of earlier. Earlier this week, I believe it was Davey Segal, released an interview. He was speaking to a representative from Nice Motorsports who had mentioned that, we got Ben Rhodes in the grass. Look at that.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't want to interrupt you, or the 99 went in the grass, so that's Ty Majeski, or is that Ben Rhodes? Yeah, no. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's Ben Rhodes. Yeah, Ben Rhodes almost wrecked the left rear of Zane Smith. The lettering is gone. Chandler Smith also lost a ton of track position there in that spot. So the battle right now is between Ryan Preece in the 17 truck, Christian Eckes, and Zane Smith, who won the first stage. Oh, that's a big wreck. Oh, boy. Corey Heim doing stuff he would do when he was driving. Oh, there goes Chandler Smith, too. Look at that. Corey Heim, Chandler Smith, D. Burrito. Happy day for him, obviously. Happy week for him this week, knowing how backwards he is. And then Grant Enfinger destroyed with 23 laps to go. But you can keep on going there.
And actually, as you're talking, I'm looking for Carson Hocevar because he is the person of interest in this. There they go. Corey
I'm ahead of you.
Getting 100,000, but
I'm ahead of you.
You must be way ahead of me.
Yeah, Phil's ahead of us by a while, because now I'm just seeing it now too. Us internet streamers versus cable.
Phil
well, that's the only reason we're paying all this damn money is because I need football. I love football, and I love golf, and I need live. I mean, the point is, I would cord cut. We had that conversation, Joe, earlier this week, and I'm like, well,
too
delayed,
hard
whatever.
When you're a sports fan, it's too hard.
Yeah, it's too hard, and I mean, I think my mom would rather we cord cut, but I'm still here, so and we barely watch TV, but she watches news. And one of the news channels she watches is only on cable. So literally, we're fucked that way. But so 22 laps to go. Dean Thompson, holy crap, is running 11th. Wow, hell is freezing over. Well, thanks to him and his dad. Because that sponsor is not only helping the Nice team put some good trucks out there for Hocevar and for Ross Chastain, but also giving Ross Chastain an opportunity in the Cup Series. So credit to Worldwide whatever transportation or whatever the hell they're called. Oh man, Grant Enfinger's truck is fucked. That thing
that was pretty big.
That one's ending up in the Dale Jr. graveyard. That I mean, it's been a great day for GMS, that's for sure. Not any of his doing, of course, Enfinger, Jack Wood doing Jack Wood things, and then I don't know why you're going 4 wide into that corner.
I think Ty Majeski, he had a run there and got pretty aggressive with it. He was already to the inside. He wasn't really like poking to the inside. He was already there. I think maybe the 4 of them just got a little too close together, and particularly the 2 in the middle, Matt De Benedetto and
Burrito went and Corey Heim. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I got totally distracted and off track, so sorry about that. But the person
That's okay. It's a
was saying-
GSP. We get off track all the time. It's mostly me though.
I'm glad I could share in the fun of getting off track this week.
I like how Josh is nodding when the tangent part. I mean, dude, you're I know you like to no sell me, but bro, like, come on, man. That's some bullshit.
What's
That's some bullshit.
What
man.
is bullshit?
You're no selling me.
I like to-
you know. You like the tangents? Okay, good.
I just say, yeah, I know we do tangents.
Okay, all right. You saved yourself there. All right, you can go ahead, Joe.
All right. So, last really big news piece, also somewhat concerning silly season. Earlier this week, Carson host, or I'm sorry, not Carson himself, but there was a representative from Nice Motorsports who was on an interview with Davey Segal, and he mentioned, what's that?
Cody Efa?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't
Or,
quite remember the name. Not a name I'm too familiar with.
Cody Efa is the guy that runs the competition at Nice Motorsports, and he used to be connected. I think he used to be a crew chief, and think he drove like there's like long connections to Cody Efa for a while. And then he became the guy for Al Nice to kind of go and set the whole thing together.
Yeah, so they were very interestingly, it came up in that interview that Nice Motorsports was looking to go Cup Series racing. And I thought it was very interesting because almost immediately the conversation from fans became, very similar to what we've discussed and what Joe Gibbs made a point about, saying Ty Gibbs, it's too fast. Progression is too fast through the levels. Why are you jumping from trucks to Cup full time? Blah, blah, blah. And Nice almost very immediately responded and said, never said full time. So it's very possible that we do see Carson Hocevar in Cup next year. I would imagine from the comments that followed the interview that it probably would not be a full-time ride. It would probably be, on the weekends where trucks and Cup run the same race or at the same racetrack, that you may find Carson starting in a Nice car, maybe 4, 5, 6 races in 2022. I think he's, I wouldn't want to see him, not because I don't appreciate him or his talent. He's clearly got the talent, but he still needs to refine and develop, same as Ty Gibbs. So I'm glad that Nice came out and said, yeah, we never said full time. Don't think about that. Only because I think that would be a disservice to both Nice and to Carson Hocevar. I think he would be rushing him far too fast into a Cup car. But I like the idea, though, of him potentially getting to go out and running a few Cup races, and then possibly having a new team, maybe for 2024, join the Cup Series force full time. Now, I don't necessarily know if they'll be able to get a charter. Maybe they have to stay as a part-time team, or maybe they just try to qualify their way in every week. I mean, let's be honest, most Cup races at this point on the week-to-week have less than 40 cars entering anyway. So it shouldn't really be a problem for them to run most races if they so chose without a charter. But really interesting on that front. Again, it was a piece of news that I wasn't really expecting. I kind of feel like with some of the news stories, I have been left a little bit out of the loop, and not by anyone in particular. I'm just shocked at some of these stories that have come out. But really interesting because they all do affect 2023. So I think what you're really starting to see here develop is the start of silly season regarding 2023, possibly years in advance. So don't be surprised if you see the schedule pop up in the next few weeks. I feel like that might be an August timeframe, so maybe a little bit later. But if you start to see some announcements, whether it be retirements, and this is across all three divisions, if you start to see some retirement announcements, this guy's going to move up next year, I would expect silly season at this point. Maybe you're going to start to see some more stuff throughout the course of mid to late July and forward.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been discussions about expansion of the charters, maybe 40. I mean, we used to have, in the heyday of NASCAR, 50, 55 cars showing up for certain races, but generally 50 cars for 43 spots. But the cars were a lot cheaper and easier to build. You'd have ARCA teams show up. You'd have Xfinity, Busch Series teams back then willing to do stuff. You know, I think Renzi, I remember when Bobby Hamilton Jr. Was driving the Marines car, and he drove for Ed Renzi, who had been connected to McDonald's for decades, and he had made his money there. And they ran a good program, but then they didn't have the financials to go and make it work. You know, in this day and age, whatever, pandemic, all these different things, there's only 36 charters. And there are certain teams that probably don't really belong out there. We got rid of a little bit of the riffraff. We still have a little bit of riffraff out there. The thing is, we don't have, if Al Neese is really serious, he's going to have to pay a lot of money. And when you consider his team is basically held up, he has one really, really good truck, and he has a bunch of ride buyers, basically financing the team. It's hard to go and finance, especially in the Cup Series, when you consider what you're dealing with there. I know, oh, that's a big wreck. Okay, yeah. So I'll let you know that Haley Deegan just got right reared. That's not the first time she's gotten right reared this week. And that was no lube, though. But that's a caution. I don't know who the heck hit her, but Haley gets to go and get into the pits and do her makeup. And
She can go in the pits and then, get a head start on recording YouTube.
yeah, she can record all her equipment. I mean, that's what's funny about today is like for all these like the female drivers, because here's the thing. I am big on supporting women racing drivers, and if you've listened to this show or you listen to any other content I've ever done in my life, I'm a perv by nature. I already talk about shit. I'm out front. I'll say crap that nobody else is gonna say. I mean, the fact is, she's got horse teeth just like her dad. She can't drive. Probably doesn't need to be in this series. Oh man, Todd Bodine had cut a tire too. I don't know who hooked her. I think somebody. I don't know, but Todd Bodine had a tire going down. Oh, I'm missing that. What? Did she just get loose by herself? Yeah, probably. She Danica'd herself. All right. She can't blame fake tits either for that. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, I mean, there's different news stories. I think the whole Nice thing, it's interesting. I mean, if the charter came along, like if Rick Ware decided to get out of Cup, which I don't think he will, I think that we're getting to the point where Rick Ware is going to end up selling one of his charters. Because that's the next step, really. Unless Stuart Haas is trying to leverage one of those to essentially have a fifth car, which, I mean, why wouldn't they? I guess Max Gutierrez might have... Oh, Tony Raines. He has Jamie Jones as his crew chief and Tony Raines as his spotter. That's a pretty good combo. And then Max Gutierrez making his Truck Series debut, so already an upgrade in the driver's seat, and he did us a favor by hooking Haley Deegan. It's better than the guy who usually drives that truck. Freaking moron. Yeah, I mean, I think if they're, I don't know who was saying, I read it somewhere. It's like, they need to go and guarantee more spots with charters, and then maybe the likes of like a Carl Long might decide to invest in that. Maybe the likes of Nice Motorsports might invest in it. If you make it reasonable, Dale Earnhardt Jr. might decide to go and get in there. That's the way to go and progress the sport. When the sport was at its best, you had 43 cars out there, more vehicles, with good owners out there is not a bad thing. You see IndyCar racing right now has gotten back to where they were in their heyday on road courses where they have 28 cars or more, 28 cars on the grid. I think that tells you that the product is not a bad product. But then it's very similar to what NASCAR has now with this next gen car. So we will see how that goes. I mean, Hocevar is somebody who has a future for sure in this sport, but you don't want to rush him. You want to give him the opportunity to learn, because you rush him, you might ruin him. Joey Logano, a bunch of circumstances worked in his favor, and the fact that he had just had that much talent for him to end up at Penske, but it could have went really bad. Daniel Suarez has had to grind his way to where he is now to be at one Cup win. There are plenty of people like Casey Atwood, just as one example, and you can list the number of people that have been hurried up too quick and fried themselves in Cup or Xfinity or whatever. It's something we have to look at for sure. All right, let's do the roundup before we get into the Nashville triple header. The first part of it is about to be done here soon. First thing we'll get into is the supercars at Darwin this past weekend. They were in race 1. The winner was Anton De Pasquale for Dick Johnson Racing. 1-2 for Dick Johnson Racing, him and Will Davison. Shane Van Gisbergen finished 3rd. Mostert 4th, and Andre Heimgartner 5th. And then in race 2, saw Cam Waters get another victory. Will Davison is second place finish of the weekend, and Shane Van Gisbergen third place finish. De Pasquale finished 4th. David Reynolds 5th. And then in race 3, Chaz Mostert gets a win. Anton De Pasquale 2nd, Cam Waters 3rd, Will Davison 4th, Andre Heimgartner 5th. In the standings right now, Shane Van Gisbergen has a 120-point lead on Anton De Pasquale, and Will Davison is 3rd, Cam Waters 4th, Chaz Mostert 5th. Mostert, of course, drives for Andretti. Walkinshaw Andretti United, the team that's the combination of Michael Andretti, Zach Brown, and Ryan Walkinshaw, who, of course, is moving to Ford. So essentially right now, I mean, not this year, of course, the leader, of course, is a lead Holden team, Shane Van Gisbergen, who's going to make his rally debut here later this year. He runs GT3 sports cars as well. Likely, I mean, this past weekend has been a good weekend for the Dick Johnson Racing team to give themselves a chance. Hopefully they'll be able to contend, but Shane Van Gisbergen trying to get 2 championships in a row, trying to get 2 consecutive Bathurst 1000s in a row. Going to be hard to beat there, and his teammate Brock Feeney, the highly rated rookie, taking over for Jamie Whincup, the Jimmy Johnson of V8 Supercars, is 6th right now in points. Good battle between Mostert, Feeney, Reynolds, Brody Kostecki. There, I brought up Brody Kostecki earlier in regards to wanting to come back to the United States and run some road courses. We'll see what happens with that. He won't be in a junior motorsports car probably because they have their connection with Miguel Paludo. But there might be some other options there. There's also a deal that for V8 Supercars that they'll be back at Adelaide next for starting this year. They'll be running the Adelaide 500 again after a 1-year break. or a couple of years, whatever. They're going to be back in Adelaide. The Clipsal 500, everybody remembers, usually the opener of the season. And it's ironic how that whole thing worked out. How Formula One used to run Adelaide at the end of the year, and now they're generally what has been their opener for many years became Melbourne. And then the Clipsal 500 used to be the opener in the V8 Supercars Championship, and now is going to be the closing event starting this year. So it's a big win for the government to go and have one of the best races in Australia back. Historic race. Adelaide 500 will be back to close the season. Scott McLaughlin, one of my guys, won there multiple times, had some great battles. So it's cool to see that race back on the calendar. Getting into the Five Flags Speedway SRX opener, a guy who wasn't scheduled to race ended up winning the race. His name is Elio Castro-Neves, four-time Indy 500 winner. And not only did he win that, he texted Don Hawk to see if there was a car available because it wasn't that far of a drive for him or whatever the hell it was. Goes and decides, oh yeah, and then they tell him, oh yeah, there's a car. They put a 13th car in the field, and by golly, him and his BFF Tony Kanaan battled for a lot of the race. But in the end, Elio Castro-Neves beats late model superstar Bubba Pollard. No Neck finished third, so that's the best finish he's had in about 3 years. We actually saw his neck in some of the opening things that they showed too. So I'm like, wow, he does have a neck. Kanaan, Bobby Labonte, top 5. Tony struggled mightily. They didn't have a great draw in the first race, and then he really wasn't able to do anything. Willie T in the pits talking to everybody was great. Paul Tracy showing his man tits tells you how out of shape he is, and part of his being a January 6th or whatever the hell he's doing shows why he shouldn't be in a race car anymore either. He sucks, and so does Michael Waltrip. So that was the opening race, and the points are very confusing too. Parker Kligerman just hit the wall. The guy in the 20, Max Gutierrez is making passes for position after sending Haley Deegan, I guess. So that's like the best run that 22 Austin Wayne Self, whatever AM racing team has had like in years, mainly because they have a good racing driver in there instead of Austin Wayne Self, who's a freaking moron. Oh, wow. We have a real battle here. So I'm going to go, before I get back into the roundup here, I'm going to try to give us the last. We're heading towards the white flag. Preece is leading his pseudo teammate, Zane Smith, who won the first stage. Carson Hocevar in third, within 0.3 of a second, coming to the white flag. So next flag ends the race. Zane Smith offers to the inside, F's up, goes and washes up high, so he's out of it. Race is likely over. He tried to go inside. Ryan Preece took the air off the front of his nose, blocking, and Hocevar passes. Slid up the track, so they're going to have a battle to the line. Ryan Preece won the second stage, and he wins a second consecutive race at Nashville Super Speedway. So 2 consecutive wins for David Gilliland Racing's star vehicle.
Zane Smith gets back for
that whole
second.
thing, and I'm still watching
the
last lap.
All right, yeah. Well, we're going to...
Zane Smith is second,
and
Hocevar third, Ty Majeski fourth, Stuart Friesen fifth. Max Gutierrez gets a top 10 in his Truck Series debut. So Austin Wayne Self, get a clue. Put him in the truck. you might actually get some decent finishes. I mean, doesn't he have Eddie Traconis as his crew chief too? So Eddie Traconis knows how to win races. So it's not an issue with the crew chief. And obviously Austin Wayne Self, they got that oil blood money. So they have the ability to go and do something. They just needed a driver. Max Gutierrez has proven once again that the D4D does work. Even if you ask the LCD fans and they tell you about how bad it is for the sport. Even though Bubba Wallace and Daniel Suarez and Raja Caruth, Kyle Larson. Well, yeah, he became a Jap. They started referencing him being half Jap, so he could get a NASCAR career. But it's true. That's the only reason he has a NASCAR career, because he said, "Oh, I have Japanese heritage."
I mean, he does,
and
he
does.
Yeah.
It's true. It's very true. But he would have never been there. And then Ganassi liked him because he thought he probably could put him in IndyCar, and he might have been in IndyCar, but he's better on ovals anyway.
All right, well,
last year he won on everything.
I'm gonna jump ahead to the truck preview really quick and say that I pick Ryan Preece to win.
That's no.
How'd you know?
Yeah, spoiler.
No, going. We make like these bold predictions on the F1 on the Grid Talk podcast. I'd rather you'd went, oh, Ryan Preece is going to be in the 10 car next year, which isn't that much of a shock either. But that's better. So I'll do that. Since Ryan Preece has already won, Ryan Preece is going to be in the 10 car next year. I think a lot of people already know that anyway, but because he's a Kevin Harvick incorporated athlete or whatever the hell they call him, because they're managed by Delana. He's the main person managed by Delana, along with O. Richard and amongst other people too. So Preece is gets another dub for the 17. I wonder how that works in regards to the so he gets to, will he run it? That's interesting. So they have to put him in the truck at Mid-Ohio here in a few weeks. They can go after the triple truck second race and triple truck challenge. They should. He ain't a bad road racer either. That'd be $100,000. It'd be good, probably 25 to 30,000 probably in his pocket, and then 70,000 to David Gilliland Racing. So that's something they have to look at. So that's interesting. I guess we'll throw to you, Joe. Here, let's get your initial takeaways, since we don't even have to do a truck preview anymore because that happened. Since he put David Gilliland knows how to go and find them. He knows how to find them stars.
He does.
Them ones don't bring the money. The ones that actually are actually talented. He knows how to put them in in a good equipment.
Yeah,
and he made one of them too.
Yeah, that's going to be 2 in a row for that 17 truck. 2 different drivers for David Gilliland Racing now with 2 wins. So I definitely think it goes to show that their equipment is probably where it needs to be competitive on the week to week. I think, I think it's probably the worst kept secret that Ryan Preece is going to be in the 10 car next year. I would be shocked if anything else happened. I don't have any other type of indication that anything else would happen. I mean, he's signed on as a Stewart-Haas Racing development driver, which is a deal that I don't really ever know we've seen like anything else, where he's going to run a few races in Cup with Ford and the 15 at Rick Ware, basically a car that in some capacity has help from Stewart-Haas Racing, running a few Xfinity races in cars that are affiliated with Stewart-Haas Racing, and running in trucks that I believe do get help from Stewart-Haas Racing. So, he's basically, when he's out there and he's racing Stewart-Haas equipment, essentially. So it shouldn't be a surprise that he's able to run up front the way he is. But he's been impressive in the races that he's been in Xfinity, running the 5. I know he hasn't had some great luck on that side. He was looking like he was going to be pretty promising in the Coke 600 earlier this year, had some trouble there. But in the trucks, he's really shined. He's got history with Gibbs. He was able to win in Xfinity, has a few win trucks. So, I mean, it shouldn't really be a secret that his talent is there. He just needs to be in the right equipment to do it. If anything happens where he's not in the 10 next year, I'll be stunned. I mean, I really don't even see another option other than Stuart Haas giving up that charter, which I don't see happening. But yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. So my two picks, I'm going to be pretty proud of myself here. My two picks were going to be the 17 and the 38 who finished 1-2. And I was thinking about picking Carson Hocevar. I know sometimes we do the dark horses. I don't necessarily know he's a dark horse at this point because he's right on the cusp of getting that first win. But great, given his poor luck and his poor finishes that haven't reflected how well he's run, I thought he would have been a justifiable dark horse. So I'm pretty happy. The three people I was debating between picking finished 1, 2, 3. So I feel pretty smart for the time being. But I don't know if I'll feel smart tomorrow or on Monday because I don't expect them to race Sunday. But yeah.
What? Sunday there's rain?
Sunday looks really bad. I've been following the forecast. Now Nashville does have lights. You don't have to ask Bob Pockers because Nashville does have lights. If you watch the race tonight, then hopefully you know that. But yeah, the weather for Sunday does not look good. They're talking about scattered thunderstorms throughout pretty much the entire day. Now, because they are scattered, maybe they don't necessarily affect Nashville, or at least not for as long of a time. But I definitely, the forecast, it just doesn't seem promising. They're talking about a high of 93 degrees and isolated thunderstorms throughout the later morning and into the day. And then, in fact,
have a late start, though.
I know, but it's still, 75% chance of rain at night. Definitely cooler, 70 degrees will be much more tolerable for the fans who go out to the racetrack rather than sitting in the probably that muggy 93 degrees. But, it's definitely... I'll talk about this more later on because I'm sure we're going to talk more about the Cup race, but I could definitely see this if they are able to start on Sunday. I think it's at best going to be a race to halfway or a race to, your Monday morning starting position.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. For sure, but, we'll see what happens with that for, practice. Bubba Wallace was fastest there. We'll get into that in a little bit. But, the truck race was not that interesting. The two guys that were really up front did what they did. So, we'll see how, but then it is Nashville Super Speedway. Hopefully the Gen 7 will provide a better product. We will see on that. The points in the Camping World SRX, Tony Kanaan and Ryan Newman are tied for the points lead. Bobby Labonte is third. Marco Andretti is fourth. And then it's a three-way tie for fifth between Tony Stewart, Greg Biffle, and Bill Elliott. Bernie Francis isn't going to run the whole season. He's an Indy Lights driver, and I think he still dovetails his Trans Am deal as well. So he won't be a full season driver. But they'll be racing at South Boston Speedway tomorrow, and we'll talk about that on the next episode of the GSP. What happens there? We'll see if Tony Stewart can come back and do something there. Getting into MotoGP, the German Grand Prix, Fabio Quartararo gets another victory by just under 5 seconds over Johan Zarco, and Jack Miller finishes third, so 2 Ducatis. And then there was 4 Ducatis out of the top 6, both Pramac bikes. Luca Marini finished 5th. Alex Espargaro finished 4th for Aprilia. A lot of news coming out of the MotoGP paddock this weekend. They had practice at Assen in the rain, which was pretty insane to see. Alex Rins looks like he's going to be signing a factory Honda contract to join LCR, so their customer team, and he'll get a brand new bike next year. That's the difference in why he's signing with them relative to Ducati. He wasn't going to be able to get a brand new bike. Suzuki definitely is out of racing next year. Alex Marquez is going to be going to Gresini to replace Fabio Di Gianantonio, which doesn't seem like a great move for them. I think Gresini would have been better off keeping Di Gianantonio because he's done a good job for them and he's qualified on poles, and I don't know. I don't know if that really is logical, but who knows. Aprilia situation, it looks like they're gonna take over the second team, the customer team, the Petronas Yamaha team that Valentino Rossi raced with till the end of his career, became I don't know who the hell sponsors them now, but they suck. And now they're going to be an Aprilia customer team. That looks like a team that's going to have some changes in regards to who's going where. And Joanne Mir is also going to go to the Repsol Honda team to be Marc Marquez's teammate. And then Pol Espargaro is going to go to Tech 3 KTM. And then to return to the KTM fold after being part of the Red Bull program prior. Red Bull KTM program prior. So there's a lot of stuff going on there in regards to MotoGP, and we'll see what happens with all of that as the year goes on. 6 hours at the Glen this weekend, one of the big races in sports cars. The MSR Acura team sees Tom Blomqvist in the Daytona 24-hour winning Meyer-Shank Racing number 60 car lead practice over the number 10 Konica Minolta, the 01 Ganassi Cadillac of Renger van der Zande and Sebastian Bourdais, and then the Konica Minolta Acura of Ricky Taylor and Philippe Albuquerque is your top three. And then the number 31 of Olivier Pla, Pippo Durrani, and Mike Conway was fourth, and Earl Bamba, Alex Lynn fifth, Tristan Vautier, Richard Westbrook, and Loic Duval rounds out the top six. Then you have LMP2s. The 48 cars there this weekend with Jimmy Johnson, Mike Rockefeller, and Kamui Kobayashi. They struggled in practice a little bit. Finished 12th behind the Montoyas. Juan Pablo Montoya and his son Sebastian, and Hendrik Henman in the LMP2. Looks like it's going to be an interesting race there. The LMP category is very close. Ben Keating, coming off of winning Le Mans week or so last week, leads in the LMP2 class in number 52, wins car. And then Ferrano, Rui Andrade, Louis Delatraz right behind him. The Aero Motorsport car of Bomarito, Thomas, and Pearson. And so there, it looks like a good battle. LMP3, the Core Autosport group with Colin Braun, John Bennett, leads that. In GTD Pro, that's interesting. GTD actually leads over the GTD Pro. So that's the Mike Skeen, Stephen McAleer, Dirk Muller Mercedes is the fastest GTD car and the fastest GT car. over the John Potter, Spencer Pumpelly, Andy Lally car. And I'm forgetting what team they are now off the top of my head. And then the Lexus of Frankie Montecalvo, Aaron Telitz, and Richard Highstand, et cetera, et cetera. 48 car field for this weekend's 6 hours at the Glen, one of the great sports car races that exists. And that comes off the announcement. There's two announcements. One is the Porsche 963 was debuted here at Goodwood in England today, actually. And they made their first run with it. It's a cool looking car. It's nice to see. Very sleek, very efficient looking.
Beautiful
The
looking
lights
car.
look kind of weird. Yeah, lights look weird. Color scheme's kind of like off-putting, but I like the whole 963 thing. Basically going and referencing the old 962 and 956 and all the other number deals that they have going on. So in regards to Felipe Nasr and Dane Cameron are going to be a part of their program, and I assume they're going to be racing in America. Andre Lauderer, Kevin Estra, Michael Christensen, Lawrence Vantor, Matt Campbell, and Matthew Jaminet, who I think, for the exception of Andre Lauderer, all the rest of them were running the GT program in the Porsche 911. Lauderer, of course, was running Formula E after the 919 program ended. So he's going to move back into the prototype category. So there's going to be another two names. So that means Nasr and Cameron are announced for the Penske US program. And then those 6 drivers are part of the championship for the World Endurance Championship. So that's interesting how all that will work. Which is cool. It's going to add to the it's going to add to the hypercar LMDH situation, make it a little more competitive, I think, which will be nice to see relative to what we have at the moment, which is a Toyota benefit at the moment. We'll see how all that works out. We'll see how it goes at Daytona because, Dane Cameron and Felipe Nasr are going to be here, but they still need 4 other teammates to race the Rolex 24, if not more. Who knows how that works? I think it's definitely 3 drivers each. Then there's also the news, another sports car person, somebody who's been involved in IMSA running in GTD category, Tell Bechtelsheimer has bought Lola. So, the Lola name in IndyCar with their great chassis back in the day, Lola in sports cars with their, the LMP2 cars. He's a British-based, he's from US, but he's from Britain, buying Lola, and trying to bring them back. It's going to be a great name, a name that's won Indy 500s, won Daytonas, won a lot of places. Lola's been involved in Formula One back in the day. Everyone knows about the 97 disaster, which basically killed the team or killed the company, but they were saved, and then they went into administration in 2012. But it looks like Bechtelsheimer is trying to go and save the company, bring them back, and hopefully have a presence not only in in the world, but I mean in the United States, but the world. So that's something we'll get to look at. I think that's a huge news story. Great chassis builder and manufacturer, got good people over the years. Have plenty of great things have come out of there. I mean, of course, Carl Haas was their distributor back for many years in IndyCar, of course, with the Andretti's when they had Newman Haas Racing. So I think that's a big piece to get into as well. Something that we'll probably see. It won't be for a while. They're coming back into the play, but I think it's a good news story nonetheless. Rally Kenya is going on right now, and they've already ran the first day, the stages. As it stands right now, Kalle Rovanperä, of course, is the runaway points leader in the World Rally Championship, and at the moment, as it stands, he leads the overall. He leads overall. Or no, that's yeah. He leads overall by. I'm trying to go and scroll here. Sebastian Loeb won a stage earlier. You have both Sebastian Loeb and Sebastian Ogier in this rally. Ogier had issues, it looks like, who also said he wasn't going to be running the rest of the LMP2 season World Endurance Championship. So that's an interesting piece there. Rovanperä leads Efren Evans, his teammate, by 22.4 seconds. Odd Tanak in a Hyundai is 25.3 seconds back in third. Katsuda in the third Toyota is fourth. Thierry Neuville in a Hyundai is fifth. Ogier, my fault, I didn't see him. Okay. Ogier is 2 minutes, 2:08 back in sixth. Oliver Solberg, seventh. Sean Johnston, the American, is running in the top 10 in a Citroen. Okay. So there you go. But then there's a couple of Fords behind him there. And then, there's 3 Fords behind him. So be hard for him to go and keep that position. Bunch of Indian drivers. I didn't know there was all these Indian drivers in the World Rally. Look at that. And then Sebastian Loeb has had issues. He won a stage, but he's literally a half hour behind at the moment in the Safari Rally. We'll get into it. We'll get into it more. Yeah, so he had an issue with the battery and engine fire just before service. So that's interesting. Unfortunate for him. Winner of the Rally Monte Carlo at the start of the year, showing off how he's one of the greatest ever. We'll tell you about it in episode 121 of the GSP, what happens with that. It's not a triple header anymore. It's a double header since the truck race happened live while we were doing this show, and we already kind of went and gave us thoughts. Like, we don't have the points or any. I mean, I can check J-Ski while we're talking. I'll go and get into some of that stuff, or we'll go and bring up some of that information. But I guess let's go with you, Josh. I mean, let's get into the picks. We can start talking about what are we looking at. We had a break, of course, last week for Father's Day, and NBC has the U.S. Open, so they weren't going to go and preempt the U.S. Open golf for NASCAR. Nashville Super Speedway, first time for the Gen 7 car on the Cup side there. So that'll be an interesting dynamic. Xfinity Series race there last year. we saw. I don't even really remember anything from the Xfinity race. Honestly, I don't really remember much of anything that happened in regards to that Nashville weekend because it was pretty boring. Truck race proof of that, really. You have in regards to this weekend's right now in regards to the practice, bring up practice speeds for the two races before we kind of get into more discussion. Xfinity saw Sheldon Creed, new dad, so congrats to him and his significant other. I forget who. I think Sheldon Creed's girlfriend is like the daughter of some racer. I forget, but they just had their first child, so congrats to him. Recently, they're by just under 2/10 over AJ Allmendinger, Gagson, Hemrick, Yaley, JJ Yaley, top 5. Kyle Weatherman, showing that when you actually put somebody in the Jesse Iwuji car that actually can drive, it's up front. Ty Gibbs, Trevor Bayne, Justin Allgaier, Ryan Preece driving for BJ McLeod in the number 5 car. Sam Mayer, and then Tyler Reddick, your top 12. In regards to your 10-lap pace, the top 5 drivers are Allmendinger, Gibbs, Preece, Hemrick, and Gregson. Creed was 6th in that list. And then there's 41 cars for 38 spots. So there is a little bit of intrigue in regards to qualifying and trying to go and make the show. We'll see what happens with that tomorrow afternoon. Barry was only 20th in practice, so a little bit of a struggle for him. Stephen Parsons, top half of the field result, driving for Alpha Prime in his first race for them, so that's cool to see. Running off of his dad doing a hit on the DJD. Bubba Wallace led the practice in his number 23 Toyota. Kyle Busch was second by 0.14 of a second for fast lap. Tyler Reddick third. Kyle Larson, William Byron, Kurt Busch. William Byron top 5. Kurt Busch, Ross Chastain, Dave Blaney, Ryan Blaney, fastest Ford. Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, so it looks like a Toyota benefit. You have all, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Toyotas in the top 11, which kind of goes back to the whole Kansas Speedway thing a few weeks ago when, of course, Kurt Busch won. That the Toyotas have a great product on 1.5 mile racetracks, even though they're concrete. The Chevys, RCR connected Chevys are also up there. Reddick is third. Dillon, Eric Jones up there. Then you have Hendrick cars. Larson, of course, dominated last year's race. And you have Byron, Bowman. The only one that's kind of held down there is Chase Elliott. Bowman's 15, Suarez, and Ross Chastain, showing once again what's how good Trackhouse has been this year in one of their theoretical home races. Since there's a lot of connections to Nashville with them. Yeah, so I mean that was practice there in terms of that. They only have 36 cars. All the chartered cars are here. Bubba Wallace is the fastest driver, 10-lap average. Larson, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, and Denny Hamlin are your top 5, all over 159 miles an hour. I think shifting is going to play a big part. So, look, and I mean Tyler Reddick even shifted and broke a transmission. So he's going to be going to tailback tomorrow. So that'll be interesting to see. Tyler Reddick, of course, who won at Texas earlier this year in the Xfinity Series for the 48 team there, for Scott Borchetta and Big Machine Racing, trying to go and win a home game there for them. So I guess let's go to you, Josh. Tell us what you're thinking in regards to Nashville, what we've already seen, what we look to see in regards to the Cup and Xfinity program, and some of your picks. And then I'm going to let Joe go do his thing, and then I'll go and kick in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this race, it's going to be interesting because last year was a bit of a surprise with how it raced. It seemed like it was a lot wider than what people expected, but I think this year we'll see how it races with the new car. I think in Cup Series we'll probably have probably a lot of passing. I think but I think the shifting is probably going to play a role into it because it seems like the more shifting we've done, it seems like there hasn't been as much passing. I mean, take Gateway, for example. You really had to generate a run in turn 3 and 4 to get, pass down, into turn 1 and 2. And then on the other end, be able to put together good turn 1 and 2 to be able to get into 3 and 4. And then we saw the slide job that, Joe Logano did to win that race. And then Kyle Busch tried to do the same thing, and then it failed. And Joey Logano was able to win the race that way in Gateway. And I think we're probably going to see something similar. Drivers trying to dive bomb into one of the corners at Nashville and see that happen and slide up into the or next to the wall, kind of like what we saw in the truck race that has just ended not too long ago. Zane Smith tried to make a pass onto Ryan Preece into turn 1 and got the air taken away and slid up into right next to the wall. Didn't hit the wall, but he's able to recover. He got passed by Ross Chastain or by Carson Hocevar, confusing the two there, but Carson Hocevar passed him on the backstretch, and then Zane Smith was able to kind of take back that position through 3 and 4, and then beat him back to the line to take second. So we'll see there what that looks like. I think it's gonna be kind of similar to that. Of course, probably Xfinity Series, maybe a little bit different with the lower downforce, more horsepower package there, and plus tires are a little bit different. So we'll see how that affects the racing with the different tire between the Cup Series and Xfinity and truck racing it with the different compounds and everything. So we'll see how that affects it. But I think Bubba Wallace, if he's able to continue his momentum from practice into this weekend, he could be a front runner, and I think it's going to be looking like another weekend where we see Toyota run up front for most of the race. The Joe Gibbs 4 racing cars, along with the 2311 team, Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace. So it's going to look like a Toyota heavy day, along with probably at least 2 or 3 of the Hendrick Motorsports cars on Sunday. So probably expect one of those cars. I think for the Cup Series, I'll probably pick Kyle Busch to win this race. Think he's got a lot of experience. Of course, won the Xfinity race here last year for his 100th win. So definitely think it's going to be one of those Toyotas, and think Kyle Busch probably pulls it out here and wins at Nashville this weekend. Think wild card, of course, I'm going to go with Bubba Wallace. I do think this is going to be a weekend kind of similar to Kansas, where they are running up top 10, top 5. As long as they can put a full race together, I think should expect him to finish within that range, get a top 5 or a top 10 in that car. So we'll see what happens there. Think in Xfinity, the 54 car won last year with Kyle Busch driving, now being full-time driven by Ty Gibbs. I think it's going to be a interesting aspect there. I think Ty's probably due for a win, hasn't won in a while, and now finally maybe he can win this weekend. So going to roll with Ty Gibbs there. Do you think Justin Allgaier probably will be a contender? Finished second in this race last year, and he definitely tends to be really good on the concrete tracks. So look out for him as well to be a contender in the top 5 there. So it's going to be interesting, weekend with the 2 races left in the triple header. Of course, the first one already being completed during the recording of the show, but it's going to be interesting weekend racing, sure, with the Ally 400 on deck on Sunday, and then the I'm about to pull the race name up, Tennessee Lottery 250 on Saturday for Xfinity. So a lot of good racing to be had here for sure.
Yeah, I think actually you pretty much hit almost every nail on the head. I like your picks for both Xfinity and for Cup, and in fact, you stole my 2 Cup picks. So thanks, Josh. Now I gotta find new people. Although that shouldn't be too hard to find. So, yeah, I mean, we'll start with Xfinity, I guess, for me. So just looking at the practice sheet, first off, I'm really impressed with Sheldon Creed this weekend. I feel like I shouldn't be impressed. I feel like I should expect him to run up front more, but he's had a rough season. He's been involved in a lot of accidents. Some not necessarily of his own doing. He's just been kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's good to see that team show a little bit of speed. There was a lot of hype at the end of last year when they announced that he would be moving into Xfinity. In fact, I was at the Roval. I was pretty much 5 feet from Richard Childress when they made that announcement. So that was really cool. And I remember that day in particular, there was so much hype, a lot of people really excited, and he's been underperforming, truthfully. So maybe this weekend will be the start of his resurgence back towards the top of a series. And I think AJ Allmendinger sort of becoming all reliable at this point, very much like Justin Allgaier. You expect him to run well. Looks like he's got a good car. Colleague prepped him a good car this weekend. And Noah Gragson, I talked at the top of the show, wasn't really sure, the past few races been a little rough for him. Maybe he's one of the next guys who moves into Cup. This is the type of run now. Again, this is just practice. A lot can happen. But this is the type of run that I would expect from him on the weekend and week out. Very similar to how he started the season, real quick in practice. Third on the overall chart, pretty good with the lap averages. And I think this type of track, roughly the size of a mile and a half. This one is a little bit smaller at 1.33 miles. For some reason, just really seems to suit his style. I don't know what it is because he's gone to multiple very different 1.5 mile racetracks and has been good at pretty much all of them. He had a handful of great races at Homestead that just got away from him many times. Had some good races at Texas. Believe he had a good one in Atlanta at some point, but this race to me, there's something about it that just says Noah Gragson. And then, like you said, Allgaier and Gibbs, I have my eyes on them. Allgaier, all reliable, as I've referred to him before, as I just referred to Allmendinger. Seems to run really well on concrete, really good at Dover. This is, I know, a very different track, but associated in the fact that they were both owned by Dover Motorsports, then bought out by SMI, and now similar surfaces, or they were similar surfaces before, but now owned by SMI. And Ty Gibbs, like you said, I think he hit that one head on as well. Just kind of overdue for a win. He's been running well, has kind of faded to the back half of the top 10 since we last saw him win. But still, definitely, I would expect him to be really good, especially knowing that 54 car did win this race last year. Bain is the other driver I have my eye on. Bain has been running really good in the races that he's been in that number 18. He's back again this weekend. Was 8th in the overall practice finish standings, whatever you want to call it. And he's shown a lot of speed in the races that he's been there. So don't be surprised if you see Trevor Bayne run at the front at any point during the race. I know he's got experience here. He ran back in the heyday when Xfinity was still running here before they left Nashville back in the early 2010s, I believe it was. And, so I know he's got some experience here that could definitely come into play, especially because there are a lot of drivers in this field who haven't run too many races here. As far as picks go, I'm going to go with actually Noah Gragson as sort of the favorite. I think he is trying to claw his way back into victory lane. I know it's only been a few races, but he's had a few rough races in the time since he last won, very much like Ty Gibbs. But I don't know. There's something about this track that to me just says Noah Gragson. And as far as a dark horse, I'm actually going to go with the guy who won practice. I know, if a few years ago you were talking about Sheldon Creed being a dark horse when he was in the trucks with GMS, I would have said that's not a dark horse. But given again, he's just not had a great year. He's been underperforming, mixed in with just being caught in some incidents that really weren't anything to his doing. To see him run really fast times is a good sign, I think, for that RCR bunch. And I think maybe if he's able to qualify well, maybe he can stay up there and give some of the regular contenders a run for their money. So I'll go with those two guys, Noah Gragson as the favorite and Sheldon Creed as my dark horse. Now, moving into the Cup side of the operation, just looking at the practice speeds, unfortunately, I missed practice earlier. I had some errands to run and was not able to watch. But again, I think, Josh, you hit it right on the head. This is shaping up to be a lot, and Phil, you said it too, a lot to be very much like Kansas. Toyotas look really fast, 6 in the top 11 and only 6 in the entire field. So when your 6 are pretty much in the top 25% or really in the top 20%, you're running pretty good. I think Bubba really probably could have been there at Kansas. His pit crew took him out of it. His pit crew's been a huge problem, and honestly, I think that might be the only thing that's holding him back from finishing top 5 more often, quite honestly, and even top 10 more often. That pit crew's got to get their stuff together. If they're able to do that, I expect him to be really well off here. I'm really encouraged by the speed that they're showing. Because of course, one of the things I was saying preseason, and in fact, I think when we had the Daytona 500 preview show, I think I said this on that show that, it wasn't necessarily a good look if you have a guy like Kurt Busch come in first year in this operation and kind of show you up. But I will be honest, even though Kurt's got that win, Bubba's been silently improving throughout the course of this season. And again, I don't necessarily think his finishes are reflective of where he's run in certain races. Kansas especially being a perfect example of that. So very encouraged by that. It does seem like, I think, Toyota's had a better program as of recent races on the mile and a halfs. Chevrolets have sort of dominated on other tracks. Ford started off strong. They've been struggling, not since Chase Briscoe won his last race, because Briscoe's had a few good runs, but it just seems like the Ford camp kind of comes in and out, right? And I know more recently they've been a little bit better. Logano got his second win of the year by getting Gateway, and Blaney won the All-Star race. So they're definitely improving, and I see Blaney as the first Ford here in practice in 8th. But again, it's just they're still not running super consistent where I'm really comfortable saying, yeah, this Ford driver is going to win. I like seeing Tyler Reddick up at the front, and I like seeing who was it that I noticed that was looking a little bit better. All right, scratch that. But I like seeing Reddick and Bubba. You got to keep your head in it. Right now we have 12 winners. We still have 10 races before the playoffs kick in, and that's a lot of time to get 4 different winners. We have Bubba has not won a race. Tyler Reddick has not won a race. Ryan Blaney in 8th has not won a race. Truex. So 4 out of your top 10 in practice, and if you want to go one further, 5 out of your top 11, 6 out of your top 12, 7 out of your top 13 in practice have not won a race in 2022. So definitely potential to get a new winner this weekend. I won't say that all of them, right? Like Truex, I think he's 7th in points. Blaney is 4th or 5th or 6th or something in points. So those 2 winning wouldn't necessarily have a super huge impact on the playoff picture. But if you have a guy like Tyler Reddick who, after last week is out of the playoffs, he started that race in the playoffs. He's now out of the playoffs. I believe 36 points is his deficit. Bubba Wallace is a little bit farther back And, guys like that would make a big difference. I mean, you're talking about in points right now. Kevin Harvick is the first driver out of the playoffs. He's 12th in the overall points. So that means the top 11 and 5 others behind 12th are your 16 playoff drivers. Now, that leads into another conversation that I'm not going to get into about the playoffs, but it's definitely an interesting dynamic this year. This is by far, to my memory under this system, the most scattered year we've had as far as people in points and into the playoffs as of now. So definitely look for new guys like Reddick and Bubba to win, and possibly that being their ticket into the playoffs. But also, I think, you would be silly to bet against someone like Kyle Busch, who has so much experience here in trucks, in Cup, and, well, not in Cup, they've only won one race, but trucks and Xfinity, a ton of experience, tons of wins. And of course, last year performed very well throughout the first and part of the second stage and kind of fell off after that. So definitely look for those guys. I'm going to say my favorite to win this race. I was going to pick Kyle Busch. However, in light of Josh picking Kyle Busch, I feel like I need to pick someone different. I'm going to go ahead and pick Ross Chastain. He finished second in this race last year and had a really good run at the end of the race. He's someone where this type of track, it's really slick, a lot of rubber getting put down and then sucked up by the tires back under caution. Something about it just really suits him. He's aggressive. He's willing to throw that out and get it a little loose into the corner. He's willing to make that bold move. And I think that's something that definitely benefited him last year in this race. So I'm going to pick him as my favorite. I think especially, with Trackhouse coming to where some of their operations are located out of, there's extra incentive for them to get either Chastain or Suarez in victory lane, especially coming off of a good race with Suarez at Sonoma. As far as my dark horse pick, I really, and again, I would go with Bubba Wallace. I think he's a great pick, Josh. But again, just to keep it interesting, make it different, I'm going to go with Tyler Reddick. He's someone we know who's hungry for that first win. He's been struggling the past few weeks. He's had a few issues that really haven't necessarily been, his fault. At Sonoma, he had a mechanical issue, one of a few that have plagued that number 8 team this season. So I think if they can get that together, Reddick has been relatively good with the shifting. It seems like he's one of the more consistent drivers when it comes to the tracks where they shift. And that goes all the way back to when they were racing at the Coliseum and shifting in the Clash. So this could definitely play in a Reddick's favor, especially him, much like Chastain, very aggressive. He's willing to kind of throw the car out there, try the different lines, and be a little bit loose. And given that this is a pretty slick track under the sun, now we might not have the sun for the Cup Series race unless they run it on Monday. Then the sun might be out. But I think it definitely plays in a Reddick's favor. So I'll go with those two guys, Chastain and Reddick. Just another few notes that I want to hit before I throw it back to you, Phil. Last year we had a really dominant race. Kyle Larson led 264 of 300 laps. I don't necessarily know that we'll see that again this year. It seems like the Gen 7 car has not really lent itself to that type of domination so far this year. Last year brakes were a big issue. This is a flatter track. It's only 14 degrees on average last year from a few onboards that I watched yesterday. Seems like cars were going into the corners between 170 and 175, give or take a few miles an hour on either end, given how old the tires were. And it seemed like they were going down to 120 to 125 low speed in the corner. So that's a big difference. I mean, that's almost the same amount of difference you'd see at Richmond or New Hampshire. So there's definitely a possibility that brakes are an issue tomorrow. Last year, Brian Blaney had a brake rotor explode. Justin Haley had a rotor explode. And then there were other drivers. Stenhouse had some brake shakes. So.
Briscoe had brake issues too when he was running. Briscoe he came up to the top 5. Yeah.
So definitely look for them. That tires, I feel like I've said it more this season than not. I really don't know about the Goodyear tires. They are, again, new tire this year. Last year, tires didn't seem to be too much of an issue. And at Dover, the last concrete track we ran at, tires also didn't seem to be too much of an issue. So I don't know that I'm super concerned, but definitely something to watch. And last year, too, fuel mileage finish. this track, given the way the stages are, 90, 95, and 115, could lend itself to a fuel mileage finish depending on when drivers decide to pit and how cautions fall throughout the last runs of the race. So just a few things to keep in mind this race weekend. Hopefully we'll race on Sunday for Cup, 5 p.m. start time scheduled. However, with a 75% chance of rain, I really don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that in regards to the race on Sunday. I mean, you guys picked a bunch of good ones. I'll go quick here because we've been on for a while. Got some other stuff going on. I got work tomorrow, unfortunately, too. So we'll just go and blame that. For me, I'm going to go and pick AJ Allmendinger to win tomorrow's race in the Xfinity Series. It just seems like his kind of track. I mean, Creed's I've been a fan of Sheldon Creed going back to his Stadium Super Truck days. Me and Adam, he was in Sheldon Creed Mark, and he got me on him. He's like little Robbie Gordon. Now that he's a dad, I just thought about it and remembered his girlfriend, fiance, whatever the hell they are, is Phil Parsons' daughter. So now we got another thing that connected all that. So yeah, Phil Parsons' granddad. I think that's part of what's getting him going and making him run faster, because he's like, God dang it, I have to buy diapers and all kinds of other stuff because baby stuff and formula and all that costs a lot of money. Sheldon Creed trying to go and get that first Xfinity win, get himself locked into the playoffs because he needs it. His point situation is really bad. If he can go and win, he's okay. That's essentially his only way in at the moment, if he can go and do that. So I think, Austin Hill's kind of fallen off too, to be fair. The RCR program has not been as consistent as other years, but then 2 rookies from the Truck Series. Austin Hill's really only shown on the super speedways, hasn't done really much anything anywhere else, really. Sheldon Creed hasn't really done crap anywhere. So if he can go out there and win, back himself into the playoff, and they can go and work on stuff, him and Jeff Stankiewicz have a way of making it happen. They've done it in ARCA. They've done it in trucks. I figure they'll do it in RCR equipment as well. But I honestly think AJ Allmendinger, the points leader right now by 43 points, trying to get those 15 playoff points, is going to go out there, win a race for Colleague. In regards to the Ally 400 coming up, hopefully on Sunday, who knows? If it's on Monday, it's good for me because I'll be home anyway. I mean, guys brought up some good ones. I'm gonna hedge. I'm gonna hedge with a Toyota, and I'm gonna hedge with Kurt Busch. I'll take Kurt Busch to get his second win of the year. We'll go and have another 2-time winner this year, and all the MAGA morons that hate Bubba Wallace say, "Oh, this guy went and won 2 races in your same cars." I'm like, the guy's got 21 years of fucking Cup experience. He's figured out a way to napalm himself out of 2 of the biggest teams in the sport. I think he knows what the hell he's doing. And he has a crew chief that he's buddies with, and they brought this whole team together because I don't know how the hell he was somehow or another able to get Billy Scott and all these other people together that he's already, those guys were all, a lot of them were the one team. There's some people that were one team, or whatever. I mean, come on. Kurt Busch knows what he's doing. I think it'd be interesting. I honestly want to see, and I think Tyler Reddick, I was going to say Tyler Reddick's a wild card and Bubba's a wild card, to be interesting, and to make it worthwhile for the segment itself. I mean, I think Reddick or Bubba have a great chance of winning on Sunday or Monday or whenever the hell it happens. Reddick is due. Briscoe sent him to the moon, so he should have a win already. But the fact of the matter is, if Bubba wins, it'll be good, because they need that W for sure. They've struggled. They've a lot of self-inflicted wounds. Tyler Reddick is due, and I think he's going to win a race. Both of them, I think, are going to win a race in these last 10 races. Where, when, I don't know, but I think both of them are going to win a race. And we're going to get to the point where you need a win to get in, which is what NASCAR wants. Joe and I had that discussion offline. I'm going to pick, as a wild card, I'm going to go pick Eric Almirola. Qualified on pole last year in this race in the Gen 6 car. Had a good car. Once he lost track position, still was up there, top 5, top 10 most of the day. It's a track that seems to suit Eric Almirola's style. And it's his last year. What the fuck? It's bacon, it's Nashville. Going win in Nashville. Pastor Nelms is probably going to talk about his smoking hot wife, even though her tits are all the way down to the frickin' floor. But, we can go and talk about bacon. So I'll pick Eric Almirola, as Rusty would like to call him, and as my wild card for Sunday. I mean, I think it's going to be a Toyota benefit or a Hendrick / Trackhouse / or it's going to be a Chevy or a Toyota. It definitely ain't going to be a Ford, which makes me mad since my favorite driver is a Ford driver, and Fords continue to suck, which isn't good. But oh well. Josh is in a hurry, so I guess the sim segment ain't gonna take too long. You can go and let us know what's going on your end of the bargain there in iRacing and the whole bit. And we'll have more time on Monday to go over everything that we had going on so far.
I mean, there isn't really much to talk about iRacing that much, anyways. As I haven't really been playing all too much this week. But I mean, on deck probably is IndyCar road course racing at Daytona in the Oval Series. There's also it's weird they've got it flipped this week. The fixed Oval Series is racing on the road course at Daytona, and then the road course Open Setup Series is racing at Michigan. So you got your oval racing on one end and road course racing on the other end. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge. My road course skill in the IndyCar on iRacing is similar to Jimmy Johnson, but just trying to hold on and be able to make it to the end, which I'm trying to do. So I mean, I felt like I was improving though. I was able to improve my lap times by 2 seconds from qualifying, running a 1 minute 36 lap, and then in qualifying, and then in race ran 1 minute 34. So big improvement there, 2 seconds, and still got to catch up because the leader was running like 1 minute 30 in the IndyCar. So still a long way to go there, but as long as I can finish.
More Tatiana Calderon than Jimmy Johnson.
Well, I mean, I think she would have crashed. An asshole,
but
yeah.
I mean, but she runs like 5 or 6 seconds slower, so
yeah.
Let's not. I know that you are an Indy 500 champion now, so you're anointing yourself in the same level as Jimmy Johnson.
Hey, he didn't even win Indy 500, so it's a level.
Well, no. The point is, he has one at Indianapolis. He is I think, at least a 3 or 4 time winner of the Brickyard
4 over there.
Yeah, so the point is, I get it. You're in the same realm. I get it. Okay. I know his road course prowess. I mean, hi to my family at home is his coach. So, I mean, he's going to get it eventually. But, yeah. So, But it was funny you said that you're more like Jimmy Johnson. It's okay.
On the road course.
On the road course, yeah, absolutely. But he's good in a sports car.
Yeah, he's
and
good
he
in
might
sports
be
car.
driving in the garage, and he might do the Garage 56 in the Gen 7 car.
Yeah, but he's
next
familiar
year.
in that car too. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how Jimmy does this weekend. And next year in Le Mans if he's able to do it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I think. What I'm going to do on iRacing. I think there's another series running the Boot Watkins Glen in the what I forgot. It's the touring car series, the Hyundai Veloster Type R and the Honda Civic Type
the
R.
TCR. Yeah.
So gonna run that. And then soon coming up is the Firecracker 400 with the E-Racer GG guys. Did that last year. Dale Jr. was in my heat race and in my preliminary race. So I think he's going to enter it, as long as he's got time, as long as I've got time. I think, I don't know when it's going to happen. They said soon. I think last year they ran around this time. So we'll see what happens.
Gotta ask him to come on, so then I'll have you two go and do the whole show, and I'll just sit in here and drink.
Well, we'll have Joe on too, so it's two Dale Jr. fans.
No, that's
Dale
what
Jr.
I'm
himself,
saying. Yeah,
and then
the two Dale Jr. fanboys get to go and interview Dale Jr., and I'll go and pepper in some stuff here and there, and I'll just be holding up the beer because I'm expecting Dale Jr. to go and drink a beer with me.
Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Man,
yeah,
I've got some High Rock here, his new vodka line, so we can have that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Mixed up.
Right.
I mixed up the he has that recipe, the screwdriver, orange juice, and vodka and some club soda. So it's actually pretty good. So yeah, it's good stuff. But
try it with the sun drop though.
Oh yeah, got to do that. That's the one you got to do.
You gotta do some Sunny D too.
Yeah, so
because Mrs. V has it going on.
Mrs. V's got it going on. Yeah. Thanks, Mrs. V. I think. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean, of course, if I stream this weekend or any other time, stream the Firecracker 400 whenever it happens. If I'm able to do it, of course, you can watch it on Twitch TV/DrewSailor2. Go and watch there all my streams. Indy 500 stream is up there. Probably gonna have to put it on YouTube soon, eventually, because it's gonna probably go away.
Let's put it on our page.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. Put it on our page on YouTube, my page or whatever. So, yeah, that's where it's going to be on. Of course, lead into the close as well. But, of course, follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/JB Huffine. And then, of course, got the YouTube page, which you can look at for this, which we'll have up hopefully tomorrow, or if not by Sunday, the Gripster Podcast YouTube. Go on there, like, comment, and subscribe, and put on notifications when we get our next upload up there, and you can see all our past stuff on there. See Joe's interview that he's been with us. I think he's got 3 videos there up on the YouTube, so you can share that with your friends, Joe, and show that you've been on a podcast multiple times, on video form. So always glad to have you on there or on here. So glad to be able to do this every week with you, Phil, and talk about racing and stuff, of course. So go and subscribe to our page on there, and let you, Phil, do the rest.
Yeah, Joe. Let us know where we can go and find your work now that you are a roving reporter at a racetrack. So you're moving up. I wish you had the credential at Pocono, because then I would just piggyback off of that. You should have a credential at Pocono, honestly. You work with a legitimate deal there. They should have went and applied for you there and in Dover and Richmond, and then I could just be your lackey, and I'll just go and be your photographer. I'll do that. I have no problem. I understand I know my role, but you are a talent. You have a passion for this deal, and your insights are one of the great things that make our show roll. And we go long. Like when the 3 of us go, this should be a live stream or something instead of doing a podcast, I think, because we could really have a bench racing discussion. We probably have to do this in the off season, in between the football and all that, and we could go and have some bench racing discussions, watch an old race or something, and have a live stream. But thanks as always, man. I know racing's a part of you, same way as it is for Josh and I. It's always good talking to you. Where can we find your work? Where can we find you tomorrow? Because I think we know where you're going to be tomorrow, working. And what should we be expecting in regards to your written content?
Yeah, so first off, it's always great to be on the show. I love coming on here. I love podcasting. And actually, in fact, in more recent weeks, I've been dabbling. Part of the reason I wanted to get this mic was possibly to see if maybe podcasting would be a larger role in my future. But for now, you can find my work at beyondtheflag.com. It's a fan-sided website. Write about NASCAR. There's great Formula One content and some IndyCar content by some of our other writers. I usually stick to NASCAR, for the most part, Cup, trying to come up with some more creative ideas for Xfinity, for trucks perhaps, but unfortunately I usually miss those races just because of work and other obligations. I'm very, very excited. So next month I'm going to have a piece about drivers who potentially still have a shot to impact the playoffs. However, I'm planning not on releasing that until we got only a handful of races left, just because we want to see 10 races a lot of times. So that'll be next month. I recently just published a story about what's going on with Hendrick Motorsports, what's happening with their performance and their Ford drivers. Why have they not really shown their hand at the end of the races in the past few weeks and really the past month, ever since Chase Elliott won at Dover. So you can find me there. If you're on Twitter, follow me at Passero Jr. That's Passero Jr. And then on top of that, I totally forgot about this account for some time, but I have a photography account now. If you're a racing fan, I encourage you to check it out because I will have some more racing photos on here. But I had an account, I started it up, and I feel bad because I barely ever used it past like 2 or 3 weeks. Because this was back when I was in college, but I've rebranded it. It is now j.p.media_. Because that was the only thing that was available with my initials and media in it. So I don't know if the camera's going to focus on this. No, it's not. But j.p.media_. That's on Instagram. That is not on Twitter. That's Instagram only. And so I am going to be posting some photos, not just of racing. I love taking my camera out to the racetrack, but I've got a lot of other photos from some traveling that I've done. So it'll be sort of a shared space for some of my other creative work in the photography side. So you can follow me there. You follow me on Twitter. And if you're local and you're at New Egypt Speedway on Saturdays, you can find me over there. I'm usually wearing a very fluorescent neon yellow vest. I'm in the infield during the races. So if you see me, say hello. Let's chat. And if you're going to be at Pocono next month, I will be at Pocono. A little bit of a different project. I'm still toying with some equipment for that, but I will be at Pocono Raceway. So if you see me there, also come say hi. Josh, Phil, thanks again so much for having me on the show. I love doing this. I enjoy it a lot. And hopefully I'll be back soon.
Oh, you will be. We rely on you. Josh needs you to be in because I'm not reliable, even though I'm the host. So for me, I'm at Philip G. Matthew on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at GripStripPod. And our YouTube page is at GripStrip Podcast or GripStripPod. The GripStrip Podcast, you can find us Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podbean, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Verbal, YouTube, of course, as I mentioned. You can see me on the F1 Grid Talk podcast. I do hits. They asked me to host for whatever reason, considering how unreliable I am for my own podcast. The fact that a podcast that actually has Formula One actually posted on their page about podcasts that you should listen to, and they talked to Grid Talk podcast. I got ragged on social media about my pronunciation, so go fuck yourself to those people. I do a good job pronouncing names and things. I feel like I'm doing my best Bob Varsha in regards to who's a legend. God bless him. He's one of the great announcers that exist. I do my best Bob Varsha in regards to pronouncing all these things. So the fact that you're going to slag me as a guy from New Jersey, a Brooklyn-born guy who's lived in New Jersey most of his life, who loves racing, and you're going to slag me. I love racing and I love Formula One. You're going to slag me? Go fuck yourself, bitch. I've done more with Formula One than you're ever going to do in your life. So go fuck yourself. I just had to get that out because the fucking Avalanche lost. They're up 3-2. They'll go to Tampa Bay on Sunday night. So if the NASCAR race doesn't happen, I'm going to be watching a hockey game with my buddy at the V and hoping that the Avalanche take off their first championship in 21 years. It was a rough game. They really never had the momentum. But we'll talk about it on Monday because I think we're going to be doing our next show after that. So we'll talk about it on episode 121 of the Gripster Podcast. Follow me on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook anymore for many reasons. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Philip G. Matthew 28 there. Follow Gripster Pod. Follow us. Thank you, Joe. I think the dynamic we have is probably not meant for podcasting. I've realized that. I've recognized that amongst multiple episodes we've done. I think it's more of a live stream thing that we need to do. And I think we'd be able to do some real work. Oh, look at that. Ellie Tonglet decided to come out of retirement again. The NHRA at Norwalk. It makes me sad because this is when Englishtown used to be around this time of the year. And now Norwalk is like basically been able to go and take that spot. And then like last week they had drifting. And I'm like, okay, Englishtown NHRA would happen. You could have Norwalk, that's good. Whatever. It's fine. We'll go with that. Thank you for listening to Gripster Podcast. It's a tough time right now in our country in a lot of ways. Take care of one another. Be nice to one another. Joe brought it up earlier, but be nice to one another. Be good to one another. Things are brutal, but thank you for listening to GSP. We'll be back soon with another episode. We'll be talking a lot of racing, talking a lot of sports. Football is coming soon, so we're going to get into that fantasy football content real quick. I'm debating possibly starting another league, so put that out there as a carrot. We'll see you next time for the Gripster Podcast. Take care and goodbye.